Through the Priory's efforts, and with the skilled negotiations of representatives from all the friendly cultures and races of Tyria, it was decided that a compromise between the various languages would be the best solution. In a landmark decision, with the Asura casting the sole dissenting vote, the symbols of Old Crichton were combined with the ease of use of Old Ascalonian, and the New Crichton alphabet was born. The year was 1105 AE. Over the past 220 years, New Crichton has become the standard writing system in Tyria, and is used widely throughout the human kingdoms, the Asura colleges, and by the Norn. The Dermond Priory set out to promote literacy and make the use of the new alphabet commonplace, so that all intelligent beings could read and understand the words that were appearing all around them. Today, every citizen of Tyria, regardless of their origins, is given the opportunity and the education to read and understand the alphabet of New Crichton. Even old enemies such as the Char and new friends like the Silvari have adopted this system of communication so that all can be understood and make plans to combat the common threat they now face. In particular, an unexpected boon for the New Crichton alphabet came from the Char's industrial technology, in the form of the first printing press, which has changed the written word in Tyria forever. Now, books, signs, and periodicals are found in every corner of the world, and more applications of the written word appear every day. If one looks around, you can still see examples of Ascalonian runes, Old Crichton symbols, and Asuran script throughout Tyria, but they are a legacy of the past. The future, or at least the foreseeable future, will be written in one alphabet, perhaps symbolizing the unity of differing races coming together as one people that struggles to survive and carry a new legacy forward. Came then Desmina, spurned and exiled by her people. And in her misery and wretchedness did Desmina curse the gods for abandoning all who, like her, admired power and ambition. And asketh she, "Where is the god to whom I may give my undying devotion? Where is the god to whom I may beg revenge against those who scorn me?" And rumbled then the earth from far below, and with a terrible groan split open. The ground grew white with frost and ice, and from forth the frozen earth spilled the rotted, skeletal minions of Grenth. Appeared then the god, and with bony hands outstretched, welcomed the girl into his fold. Saith he, "I am your god. Follow where I lead, come whence I call, and the rotted corpses of the dead will be yours to control." And swearing allegiance in life and beyond, did Desmina thence become the god's first follower. A messenger from Ascalon arrived today, bringing the first word from home since the Vanguard were tasked with slowing the Char offensive years ago. The Vanguard's deeds reached the ears of the king. The forces have been recalled. There's a quiet relief that can be felt throughout the unit. Their long, hard-fought struggle is coming to an end, away from the troops. Captain Gwen Thackeray seems concerned, an unspoken question on her lips. Though Ascalon is telling them to return, is their mission really complete with Char still nearby? The troops leave a skeleton force to protect the Eye of the North as they set out in the black of night on their return journey. The captain won't let the Char know that they've all but abandoned the North. The fanfare upon returning to the ruined city of Ascalon was indescribable. The Vanguard has accomplished something the troops here in Ascalon have only dreamed of: victory against the Char in their own land. King Adalbern's speech commemorating the efforts of Captain Gwen Thackeray and the Vanguard moved both civilians and soldiers alike. The Vanguard's efforts bring hope to a war-torn land. A week has passed since the return of the Vanguard to Ascalon, and still the hero worship continues. Children run through the streets playing Evan Vanguard and Char. King Adalbern has called the city together to make an announcement. The Vanguard are ordered to appear in full dress uniform. Uncertainty ripples through the unit, but this does not diminish their pride. The Vanguard is being sent south, to the mouth of the Crystal Desert, where a dire threat is rising. They're charged with building fortifications to protect against an enemy the king warns is coming. Captain Thackeray gracefully accepts the duty placed before her and the vanguard. Civilians look confused and worried. This new threat was not expected. Today, a weaponsmith questioned the king's decision to send the vanguard back into harm's way so soon. In response, the king decreed that he should join the expedition to keep the vanguard properly armed. Before long, a baker, a leather crafter, a tailor, and their families had also been ordered to join the caravan. Is this a sign of support from the king, or an act to remove opposition from sight? It's a question I dare not voice. Regardless, the Ebon vanguard prepares to leave home once more, doing so without complaint and with their usual efficiency. The day the vanguard left Ascalon, the second time, was sad but proud. Civilians lined the street to honour these heroes from the north. At the city gates, dozens of civilians from various trades met the unit to unexpectedly join them on their journey. Additional supplies were packed to accommodate them. So many people willing to leave with the vanguard and abandon all they'd ever known. Was it pride for the unit that spurred them on? Or was it fear from their king? Days turned to weeks as the vanguard marched south. Expected travel time to the destination had increased with the addition of the tradesmen and civilians, but no complaints were ever raised. I suspect that the Ebon Vanguard soldiers are happy to have actual professional chefs to prepare their meals and armorsmiths to keep their equipment in working order. Rigo Bolan of Lieutenant Kieran Thackeray's Ebon Falcon scout unit discovered an animal that had been torn to shreds by claws or teeth this morning. Not taking any chances, the Vanguard is now on high alert. Civilians are told only that travelling in a new land can be dangerous and they must be prepared for anything. They've been ordered to stay close to the caravan and not wander off by themselves. Several days have passed since we first discovered the shredded animal remains. Off in the distance, I can make out blurs that seem to be moving with us. Is something really out there? Or is the long trek making us paranoid? And more importantly, if something is out there, are we leading it? Or are we being led? I guess only time will tell. At dawn, our greatest fears were realised. A warband of Char ambushed us from the brush. The Vanguard always believed their battle would be against the Char, just not this far south. Though the Vanguard were used to the horrors of Char battles, the civilians travelling with them were not. Many broke off from the caravan, fleeing in terror as the monsters set upon us. We struggled to maintain our defences while returning those who had fled to the safety of the caravan. Questions danced in my mind during the fray. What were these Char doing here? Were they leftovers from the failed assault against Or? Were they a herald of tragedies to come? Corporal Diane Famati pursued a young couple who had taken off. Unfortunately for them, the Char found them first. Unwilling to leave them to die, Diane rushed in against far greater numbers. Despite the odds, he kept the Char at bay and held out long enough for help to reach them. Sadly, the effort cost Dian his life. Dian died a hero's death that day. We were by his side when he passed from this world into the mists. He wore a smile on his face as he drifted off, eased by his dying wish. Just one more drink of rum. The craftsmen are afraid. They were not prepared to be assaulted while we moved. Perhaps they thought the threat in the south was a passing madness from King Adelman? Or did the king really know the horror that waited us here? Did the civilians forget the terrible searing and the pain that came with it? Had the return of the Ebon Vanguard lulled them into a false belief that they were safe? I pondered these questions as we continued to make our way south. Gwen continues to lead the caravan with firm resolve. Her speeches and encouragement lift the spirits. She has come so far since joining the Vanguard as a frail child. She is a true successor to Captain Langmar. It has been more than a week since we first ran into the Char. Their attacks continue, but at random intervals. Sometimes we have a day of peace, sometimes only hours. Defensive efforts are starting to take their toll, but the soldiers put up a brave front for those they're protecting. This morning's attack took the lives of 2 more brave Vanguard soldiers. A small service was held for them, delaying our journey southward. We can finally see our destination, the mountain range that separates Ascalon from the Crystal Desert. That's where we'll find our new home. The very thought lifts our spirits. Kieran suggests that we make for a mountain slope to the southwest, and Captain Gwen agrees. From there, we can move in and set up a camp in the pass that leads through to the desert. The trek will be dangerous. We must cross an open plain where we will be pounced upon by the Char. Will we survive? Only the Six know. As night fell on what was to be our last day on the plains, the massive assault began. There seemed to be no end to the murderous Char. When one fell, 2 or 3 others were there to take its place. Dawn was barely breaking when Coro Sagewind called for people to break for the hills. Lawrence Crafton and Rigo Boland stood guard while Coro cast the greatest illusion I would ever witness in this lifetime. A mystical army arrived from the north. Most of the Char broke off and, in feral bloodlust, charged the illusion. Coro's trick brought us the time we needed to prepare for the next assault. Arrival. Gwen and Kieran led us into the mountain pass, while Nola Shepherd led a detachment holding our flank. As the battle raged on before us, seconds turned to minutes, minutes turned to hours. At a mountain clearing, we discovered an old, abandoned mining town. Its masters were long gone, but their possessions would aid us in our struggle against the Char. No longer willing to stand idly by, our civilians took up discovered arms or built barricades against future Char attacks. Kieran spent the day teaching them to build traps that would litter the slope to the town. Coro approached the camp at dusk, her 2 defenders nowhere in sight. Her pace slowed and staggered. Blood dripped from her face and, blinded, she tripped over a rock. She fell before our makeshift camp. Coro had tapped her own life force so that she would make it. Kieran held her in his arms in her final moments. She reminded him of the last time she had created such an illusion to save her unit. Years before. Her parting words bolstered our desire to survive. She truly was the heart of the Falcons, but the Vanguard would not let her death be in vain. Gwen stirred the hearts of the survivors once more with talk of brighter tomorrows. The Char feared the Ebon Vanguard in the north, and they would fear them in the south as well. The worry she saw in the eyes of her people was replaced with hope. The Ebon Vanguard would no longer be protecting the people, it would be standing united with them to protect a common future. Just as Coro foretold, the Char returned, furious at having been tricked into fighting an army that was never there. But the precious time she brought us had not been squandered. We stood ready for them. Unexpectedly, mad with grief, Nola raised an army of undead from beneath the earth, an army consisting of the town's previous occupants. Her forces created a wall against which the rushing waves of Char broke. Ignoring Kieran's order to fall back, she marched beyond our front lines. The lieutenant vaulted the barricade, attempting to reach her before the Char could. To everyone's surprise, he hit her with his fist and knocked her out. Then he picked her up and rushed her unconscious form back behind our defensive position. The battle lasted for hours, and we suffered many losses. But for every human that fell, a dozen Char lay dead before them. We defined our existence on that day. With the battle finally over, we accounted for the dead. The baker and her son, who had taken up arms along the front lines, were among those who did not live to see daybreak. The Char have pulled back for now. We can still see them on the horizon, pacing and waiting. Captain Gwen has drawn the line, and we're not moving from this spot. But unlike before, we will be ready for them, and will make them pay. The quarry attached to the mining town is said to be rich and deep, or so one of the craftsmen tells us. He and a couple of others are already preparing to retrieve stone to reinforce the town. Private Casey Carpenter has joined the workers in the quarry, pulling up massive stones that are now being moved to replace our makeshift barricade at the front. The foundation for what will be a massive gate is being built. Other Vanguard soldiers have put down their arms, for the time being, to help the civilians reinforce our position. Slowly, our defences are taking form. Our losses have been great, but now we've all been forged in the crucible of battle. We are united under a singular purpose. We are home. Gwen walks among the weary survivors, thanking them for their tireless efforts. She's beginning to reorganize soldiers and civilians alike into teams, each working to establish our residence in this mountain pass. The look of uncertainty has all but vanished from everyone's eyes, replaced now with determinations. People have come to terms with their fears and now advance with a unified spirit. Captain Gwen Thackeray tells us we are finally home. We are ready to believe it. We won't flee from our home, our Ebon Hawk. Come, Char. We will meet you on the battlefield, but we will not move from here. The final line has been drawn. Kim's the historian. The gods never halted their work creating the world, and with the benevolence of indulgent parents, they decided to create magic. It was to be a gift to all the intelligent creatures, meant to ease a life of toil and make survival a less arduous task. When they had finished creating their gift, they presented it to the humans and the Char, the Tengu and the dwarves, the Minotaurs and the Imps, and all the races of the land. But the gods had not counted upon one thing: greed. Wars broke out immediately as the magical races fought for dominance. So much destruction was wrought that the humans found themselves at the edge of extinction. When all seemed lost, it was King Doric, the leader of the united human tribes himself, who made the long trek to Ara, the city of the gods on the Orient Peninsula. He gained an audience with the creators and begged them to help, to stop the wars and bring peace to the land once again. The gods heard his pleas, and they intervened. The forging of the world was complete. As their final act, the gods gathered back their gift of magic from all the races and trapped it inside a tall stone. They smashed the stone into 5 parts, 4 equal but opposing stones of magic and 1 keystone. Without the keystone, the other 4 couldn't be reassembled. The gods told King Doric that since he had asked for the peace, he and his descendants must carry the burden of protecting the stones. As an additional precaution, they used a drop of King Doric's blood to seal each of the stones. Then the stones were dropped, one by one, into the volcano off the southern shore of the kingdom of Krita, and the gods left this world forever, confident that they had balanced out their gift and circumvented greed. Situated on a peninsula south of Ascalon and west of the Crystal Desert, Or was a vibrant, proud, and prosperous nation. Its citizens were the favoured of the gods, living in the shadows of Ara, the deserted city once inhabited by the likes of Melandru, Dwaina, and Balthazar. Deeply spiritual, the Orions looked after the buildings and structures left behind when the gods left Tyria, caring for them in the hopes that one day the divine beings who created magic and bestowed it upon the world would return. The Orions were a peaceful people, hoping only to do their duty towards their gods and content to be rewarded in either this life or the next. When the guilds began feuding, Or as a nation tried to stay out of the conflict. This was not the sort of struggle that entire kingdoms got involved in. But when the strife overflowed into armed conflict, and guilds from the other human nations began fighting in the streets of Ara, Or rose to defend itself and the city of the gods. The 100 years following the exodus of the gods were a time of peace and prosperity, especially for the various human nations. 3 powerful countries emerged: Krita, Ascalon, and Or. Each of these nations was home to its own dynasties, politics, and cultures, but no single country was seen as dominant. Instead, this was a time of invention and trade. Connections and opportunities led to the creation of guilds. At first, these were economic organizations, a means for merchants to meet, disseminate goods, and set prices. However, the guilds grew beyond the bounds of mere trade. Soon there were guilds geared toward warfare, religion, magical ability, and even social concerns. In short, any purpose that would bring together a group of people. Because the guilds fostered communication as well as economic prosperity, they transcended borders. For instance, a guild that held sway in Krita might also have chapters in Or and Ascalon. They also began to dominate the political arena. A king or council might make a law, but it was the military guilds that were responsible for enforcing the proclamation. In essence, guilds began to hold the real power of human society. Change came in the form of an enormous natural disaster. The volcano off the Critan coast, which had been used to contain the Bloodstones, erupted. The stones were scattered throughout the land, and the magic they contained seeped into whatever they touched. Once humanity realized what had occurred, and the potential inherent in the Bloodstones, they attempted to possess them. However, because so much power was held by the guilds, they used their influence over the human nations to vie for control. It became an enormous game of power, prestige, and guile, with countless guilds each struggling to claim the Bloodstones. This period of strife and warfare was called the Guild Wars. The Guild Wars lasted for centuries across the three. It was not comprised of any single campaign. Instead, it encompassed a long-term struggle between a number of distinct factions. Over time, with no clear victor, the quest for dominance embroiled all the human nations. Ascalon, Or, and Kryta declared war on each other, which caused constant fighting, manipulation, and the deaths of many. The Third Guild War came to an abrupt and brutal end by the emergence of an even greater threat. The Char invaded the human kingdoms, and they brought with them such brutality and ferocity that all the other conflicts paled in comparison. The Char military was a force the human lands were not prepared for. They were used to human tactics and human sentiments. The Char were another force entirely. They looked at the human countries, weakened by war and infighting, and saw lands ripe for conquering and subjugation. Risen from the ocean by the will of a powerful undead dragon, Or no longer stands under human control. The beings roaming those lands are twisted, perverted remnants of Or's once magnificent culture. Drowned by magic and then raised into service by the will of a monster so terrible there are only whispers of its nature, they now serve a dragon, more horrible and powerful than any other being in Tyria. The Elder Dragon of Or rules this re-emerged continent with an indomitable will, claiming the peninsula for its own. The city of Ara, where once the true gods walked, rose to the surface to become the creature's home. Its arrival heralded a time of cataclysm and change for the world. Though Ara lies in ruins, conquered by the dragon and its minions, those who venture into Orian soils say they have seen her spired towers, bedecked with rotted banners and guarded by twisted, draconian troops. When the dragon awoke and the peninsula breached the waves, once ruined buildings and shattered coastal highways rose above the sea as well. In addition to drowning the coastlands of Kryta and flooding Lion's Arch, this cataclysmic event even turned parts of northern Alona green again for a time. The changes were truly cataclysmic across all of Tyria. Only the greatest of heroes dare venture within the ruined cities of Or. To adventure there is to face the dragon and its minions directly, and that creature's power is not to be underestimated. "Why do you like Or so much?" Sethus asked him one night when they were lying in their hammocks. He bunked below Kabaya, occasionally reaching up to poke him with one foot when he couldn't sleep, which was all the time. "Or's boring, Kabaya. It's all sunk underwater now. There's nothing to see. It's not like you can ever go there, so what's the point?" "I'd rather hear about the heroes of the Searing in Ascalon, taking out the Char." Sethus punched at the air as if fighting an enemy, winning the hand of the fair maiden Gwen. Those are good stories. "Char are just mindless monsters, Sethus," Kabaya yawned. "There's nothing interesting about a mindless eating machine. You might as well be scared of the Doliac that pulls the carts in the city. Or is where magic comes from. The gods themselves lived there once, and now it's vanished, beneath the ocean, never to be seen again. Think of all the riches it must contain, the wealth and ancient secrets. I'd take that over monsters any day." "Or sank because of the Char," Sethus said smugly. "They marched across Ascalon, and then they went to Or next. And the wizards of Or..." "Viziers," Kabaya said, correcting him. "Whatever. A vizier tried to use magic to stop the Char army, but ended up sinking the whole peninsula. The gods themselves punished him. He got turned into a lich in penance for what he'd done. You know what a lich is? It's an undead creature, risen from the grave." Sethus grinned ghoulishly. "He got punished, Or was destroyed, and the Char conquered Ascalon instead. That means the Char won. See? Char beats Or. Sethis crossed his arms and swung back and forth in his hammock. Even though it was dark, Kabaya could hear the grin on his face. The feeling on deck wasn't one of celebration or even tense battle readiness. Silently, the Havoc sailed between the high cliffs that once stood guard over the city's harbour. They were half as tall now, mere circles of stone peering over the high line of the sea. Around them, the remains of waterlogged masts jutted up through the waves. Kabaya peered over the side of the Havoc, staring down into the water. Silt and earth swirled around the wreckage of houses, shipyards, and even cobblestone roads. There was nothing left of the white towers that had ringed the central keep, or of the lion statue that stood guard over the city walls. There was nothing left of the home he'd known, the city where he'd been raised. Everything was drowned, buried in the massive surge of water. No one had survived. So many dead. And why? Where had the wave come from? What magic had overturned the sea? Had the nature goddess Melandru struck out in wrath, or had some darker force cast a horrible spell? Stories claimed that the kingdom of Or had been destroyed by such a spell, cast by an ancient vizier. Kabaya remembered the land he'd seen beyond the great wave, among those strange mountains, and in the wide, black plain he'd seen buildings. Tall ones, with spires like Malkor's fingers, but far more elaborate and delicate than those jutting stones. Could it have been Or itself, risen from below the ocean's depths? The fabled city of Ara? Was such a thing even possible? Port Stalwart shone like a pale jewel above the glistening turquoise lagoon. Built on a hillside that rose sharply above the water, the little village had swelled in the last 10 years. The clean white masonry of new buildings rose like gulls' wings, hovering above the tidy rows of small houses that dotted the crisp, snowy beaches. 2 waterfalls poured out of the forest, one above the other, leaping down from threaded boulders through heavy greenery, and pouring at last with a bubbling roar into the bay. After the great tidal wave hit the Crichton shore and devastated Lion's Arch, Port Stalwart's harbour had swelled well beyond its banks. Now it was home to bustling docks, a massive wharf, and the most active trade community on the coast. The Asura traded through Stalwart. On occasion, a Nor or Char vessel would dock there, risking the ire of the humans in the name of profit. While not welcomed exactly, such vessels had little choice if they were to berth after a storm. The flames were beautiful. They looked like autumn leaves, red and gold, rattling as the wind tore through them, breaking free and whirling into the sky. The village was flying away. Thatch and wattle and rafters all were going up in ash. Kaith watched the village and the villagers burn. She was too late. Everything was fire. Still, it was beautiful. Kaith, Sylvari of the Firstborn, dropped down from the boulder where she had crouched and stalked slowly into the burning village. Like all of her people, Kaith was slender and lithe, the child of a great tree in a sacred grove. She was one with the natural world. Even her travel leathers bore the vine motifs of her homeland. Kaith pushed silvery hair back from her wide eyes, watching for signs of life in the burning village. Only the flames lived. She listened for voices, but only the fire spoke. Kaith didn't fear the fire. She was young and strong, voracious and indomitable and curious, just like fire. It had drawn her here. It was interesting. Who had started it? How? Why? What had this village been called? "I love a bonfire," came a voice, deep and dark, feminine and familiar. Kaith turned to see a Sylvari woman garbed in a black orchid gown, as if this were some fancy ball. Kaith's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here, Fowlane?" Fowlane gave the suffering smile of an addict. "The fires drew me. A moth to a flame. Just like you." In fact, Faolain and Keith were nothing alike. Faolain's hair was jet black, as were her nails and her eyes. They had been that way from the moment the two women emerged together from the pale tree. Faolain had been all about questions, and Keith had been all about answers. They were dear to each other, and set out together to explore the world. But Keith's spirit had grown straight and true like a young tree, while Faolain's had grown twisted like a poison ivy vine. "Did you set this fire?" Keith asked. Faolain threw back her shock of black hair and breathed smoke through flared nostrils. "A nice idea, but no. It was destroyers. Magma monsters." Keith shook her head grimly. "They boil up everywhere. The Elder Dragon Primordus is taking back the world." A loud moan came from a burning barn nearby. Keith rushed to the door, hauled it open, and stared within. The hayloft boiled with black smoke, and the threshing floor was mantled in fire. Against the far wall lay a blackened figure that could hardly have been alive, except that it moaned. Keith wove among the flames to reach the man and dropped down to her knees. His eyes were gone. His face, too. Just cracked bark over oozy muscle. His lips were half fused. "Burning beast! Burning beast! Burning!" "I will help you," Keith said. "Such sweet words," Faolain whispered, kneeling on the other side of the man. "Hope is like oil on the fires of misery." "Is my skin peeled off?" the man groaned. "Is it?" "Yes," Keith said gently. Faolain laughed. "Ah, you're cruel." "They came from underground," he muttered. "They scrambled up. Roaches. Black, with bodies of fire." "Destroyers," Faolain said. "We'll get you a chirurgeon." "Chirurgeon?" Faolain gripped Keith's arm and grinned. "You're doing this for me, aren't you?" "What? No, it's for him. He's dead already. You're only tormenting him for my sake." "No, I'm not." Faolain's eyes blazed. "You want me to feel for him. You want me to feel empathy." "No," Keith said. "I mean, yes, of course." "Help me," the man sputtered, his lips splitting. "I will," Keith said. Faolain's eyes slid closed, and her jaw clenched. "You can't win me back." "I'm not trying to win you back." "Come with me, Keith. Join the Nightmare Court." "I'm saving him," Keith yelled, reaching beneath the blackened figure and hoisting him from the floor. Keith strode toward the barn doors. But Faolain rose in her path and set her hand on Keith's chest. The touch of her palm blazed like fire. Then a different sort of heat bloomed across Keith's chest. She pulled back to see the farmer's throat fountaining, severed by Faolain's dagger. "What?" Keith cried, staggering back and falling to her knees. "You killed him?" "I released him. Come with me." "I will never turn to Nightmare." Faolain's eyes flashed. "My touch and the sacrifice of this man have awakened darkness in you." She turned away. "You will be mine again, soon." Keith endured the festivities as long as she could. The crowd was unsettling to her. So many people crossing paths, so many false words spoken. Snaff was perhaps the worst. Everything he said was an exaggeration, which meant a lie, but still the Norn roared with approval. Why should the Dragonspawn's defeat be commemorated with lies? Keith wondered to herself as she stepped from the hunting hall. "You never could enjoy a party," came a voice like scarlet silk. Keith gasped, turning to see Faolain. "What are you doing here?" "I've been following you," Faolain said, standing in her black orchid dress, leaning in so that her warm breath wafted across Keith's ear. I've watched you risk your life to kill a dragon champion. Foolish girl. Kaith stared quizzically at her. You act as if it is nothing. It is nothing. Your life is too precious for this. Kaith pushed Faolain back. I don't belong to you. Don't you? Faolain's black fingernails flashed to pull back the collar of Kaith's shirt. There, above her heart, a black handprint marked her skin. Your heart belongs to me. No, Kaith said, prying Faolain's hand loose and turning away. I reject the nightmare. But you love me. Faolain nodded toward Air and Ritlock within the hunting hall. Do they love you as I do? Kaith scowled. I don't know what they feel. They are a mystery to me. But I am not. There are no mysteries between us. Faolain's black eyes grew suddenly intense. Join me. The dream is only a dream. The nightmare is the reality. Leave me. The Dark Sylvari took an unsteady step toward Kaith. My love is poisoning you. You cannot be without me. Go! Garm quirked his eyebrows and stood also, seeing at last two little people standing in the doorway. They came up only to the belt of a Norn, and they were grey, with giant ears swept back from their childlike faces. One was male, dressed in a greatcoat over a buttoned-up vest and brown trousers. He wore two large gauntlets with gems hovering over the backs of them. The other figure was female, decked in bluish body armor that looked jury-rigged, as if she changed its dimensions constantly. Despite their strange voices, they looked intently serious. Oh, there you are, said the slightly taller creature. Heirs to Garkin, I presume? I'm Master Snaff of Ratasum, Asura genius. I've been told you're the best. Told by whom? Air asked. Asura. Of course they would be Asura. Short, smart, and irritating. Snaff smiled, bowing. I cannot reveal my sources. The younger Asura shot him an annoyed look, as if he often revealed his sources. Unperturbed, Snaff continued, This is my associate, Zoja, genius in training. She also bowed, but her scowl only deepened. We've come for a commission, Snaff said. Garm yelped, a strange sound from a dire wolf, and his claws skittered on the stone floor as he ducked back from the huge golem. Air also leapt back, her mallet before her. No, nothing to fear, Snaff assured. He patted the golem's metalwork ankle. The leg was articulated with arrays of aura pumps and servos. She's harmless, Snaff frowned. Well, not exactly harmless. She could kill us with one swat if she wanted to, but she doesn't want to. How do you know? Air asked. Because she doesn't want anything, Snaff explained. No, let me show you. He scrambled up onto the stone table where the golem sat, clambering onto her leg, and climbed the metal piping that crisscrossed her barrel-shaped torso. Reaching the golem's face, Zoja's face, at 5 times the height, he waved his hand in front of the stone eyes. See? Nobody's home. Garm trotted in a wide circle around the golem, watching it warily. Air had not lowered her mallet, and her other hand hovered near the chisels on her belt. But why? Why what? Asked Snaff, lounging happily in the metal collar of the creature. Why make this thing? Snaff slid down the broad torso of the creature and landed on the thing's legs. I just feel that every golem ought to have a good head on her shoulders, especially the 18-foot tall ones. Not that the Arcane Council agrees. They're churning out golems with no heads at all. Easy to build, sure, but they're dumb as posts. What's the point of that? He doesn't do anything the normal way, Zoja noted. Snaff glanced fondly at his creation. I think I'll call her Big Zoja. Normal-sized Zoja stomped her foot and stared daggers at him. And she'll have quite a ferocious look when she gets into combat. Into combat? Air asked. Snaff nodded. She's a war machine. War machine? Why not? Wars shouldn't be fought with flesh and blood. Somebody might get hurt. I'm hoping to revolutionize war. Make it the province of golems without people involved at all. Let them bash each other's brains out. The nation with the best golems wins. He gestured behind him to another stone table where a second metal warrior lay. I'm what you call a philanthropist. Air laughed. We pronounce it profiteer. The moment before the axe rifles fired, Logan Thackeray swept his hand out in a fan. A blue aura bled from his fingertips into the air, solidifying it in a curved wall before the scouts. Fire! The Char Centurion roared. The axe rifles boomed and vomited smoke and lead, but the shots struck the ethereal membrane and sank into it, and were eaten away. Bullets showered rust to the ground. The leader of the Char stared, his jaw dropping. You're full of surprises. I'm Logan Thackeray. I protect those who are mine. I'm Ritlock Brimstone, the Char shot back. I kill those who aren't. I recognize your blade. Did you say Rurik Brimstone? Ritlock, the Char snarled. Logan shrugged. I just figured, since you stole Prince Rurik's sword, you probably also stole his name. Ritlock lashed the air with the burning blade. The sword's mine now. After this fight, Logan said, whirling his warhammer in a figure eight, Sahothin will once again be in the hands of a human. During this fight, Ritlock spat, Sahothin will once again be in the guts of a human. The Char and the man sat on the log, looking out at the green landscape. Long moments passed before either spoke. Logan said, This is crazy. We're supposed to be killing each other. I never do what I'm supposed to do. Logan huffed. Me neither. Ritlock cocked an eyebrow. What do you mean? Taking a deep breath, Logan said, I've got this brother in Divinity's Reach. He's in the Seraph, for God's sake. Guarding the Queen, even. One of those brothers. Yeah, Logan said, pointing at him. He wears armor that shines like a mirror, white everything, stands by the Queen all day. I was supposed to follow him, but a white knight casts a long shadow. You're pretty far from that shadow. Huh? Mercenary scout for a supply caravan in the Blaze Ridges, Ritlock said. That's about as far from your brother as you can get. Logan looked at his hands. Guess so. They sat a while in silence before he asked, You got any brothers? About a dozen, Ritlock said with a rueful laugh, and a dozen sisters. Big family. Ritlock shook his head. Char don't have families. We have war bands. The bonds are even stronger. Logan's eyes grew wide. Was that them? Back there? That funeral pyre? Course not, Ritlock snapped. Those were Iron Legion. I'm Blood Legion. Oh, you guys look alike, Logan said with a shrug. So, where's your warband? Back east somewhere. I left them. That comment hung in the air between them. Why? My reasons are my own. Just then, Kaith returned, flopping a brace of dead rabbits down on the nearby rock. All right, so I hunted them, you cook them. Sure, Ritlock said, relieved to end the conversation. I'm a good cook. Logan blasted a laugh. Yeah, right, char cooking? What's wrong with char cooking? It's right in the name. Shut it, Ritlock advised, and don't open it again until there's roasted rabbit. Logan, Ritlock, and Kaith walked among stern-looking warriors who led them from the jail to the arena. Ritlock's wrist was fully healed, but the rift between the man and Char was only partially so. Last night, both fighters had fidgeted and fussed as Logan healed Ritlock. This morning, neither had spoken to the other. They walked a narrow set of winding lanes, with half-timber houses leaning over them. At last, they reached a much-trampled plot of land with the overturned hull of a huge ship in its centre. Many people milled outside the wooden hull, and money changed hands. A few of the people there stared with lurid admiration at Logan, Ritlock, and Kaith. "Fresh meat," one man said darkly. Ritlock reached for Sahothin, but, of course, his sword and scabbard were gone. The guards marched them toward a wide, rectangular entrance cut into one side of the overturned hull. The passage was preternaturally dark, shielded by a curtain of magic, but sounds came from within. Feet pounded, voices shouted, swords clanged. Someone screamed. "Are we making a mistake?" Logan asked. "Quite possibly," Kaith responded. Ritlock scowled. "You two got any money?" "No," they chorused. Ritlock swept his claws forward. "Then let's go." The three strode among their guards through a mystic curtain. They emerged into a gigantic space, a huge arena carved into the ground. Rows of stone benches descended toward a broad, sandy arena. Warriors practiced there. To the right, a man and a centaur faced off. To the left, an ogre battled a char. In one spot, a team of gorilla-like Grawl assaulted a pair of scaly Skrit. "This must be the place," Logan said. "This is the place," responded a new voice. Sangjo emerged from one of the nearby archways and glided placidly toward the trio. "Welcome to the arena." As Air explained her plan, Logan stepped back from the others. A sudden voice spoke in his head. "Come to me, Logan Thackeray. I am an Ebonhawk. I have need of you." "She's calling to me," Logan muttered. "Queen Jenna is calling to me." His knees buckled, and he dropped to the floor. "No!" "Are you all right?" Ritlock asked, striding up beside him. Logan gaped at his friend. "Come on, spit it out! We've got an elder dragon on the way!" "Queen Jenna," Logan muttered. "She's in trouble." Ritlock grasped Logan's shoulder and hoisted him to his feet. "What are you talking about?" Logan said, "She's calling to me. I have to go." "What? She needs me. We need you." "I swore an oath." "Yeah, to us." "No, to her." Ritlock's eyes blazed. "You're part of my warband. You are my brother. You can't abandon us." Logan turned away, striding towards Snaff. "Give me the hole in your pocket." The Asura genius turned from the dragon bloodstones he'd been working on and lifted his eyebrows. "Huh? Let me see that hole in your pocket thing." "This?" Snaff asked, dragging forth the coin-sized portal. "Don't let him," Ritlock began, lunging, but Logan batted the portal from Snaff's hand. It flew, tumbling through the air, and expanded into a wide circle with a slender metal edge. The ring tottered flat upon the floor, opening up the portal back to the land south of Ebonhawk. Logan stepped toward it, but Ritlock grappled him. "You're not going! Let go of me! I have to go. I'll come back." "What if you can't come back?" "I can come back. I will." "What's going on?" asked Air, approaching. "He's leaving," Ritlock said. "Leaving?" she said, gaping at the hole on the floor. "I have to defend Queen Jenna." Air looked levelly at him, and her voice was stern. "You have to do what is right." "Thank you," Logan said fiercely, ripping his arms free of Ritlock and leaping through the portal. He seemed to hang for a moment above the sands, but then vanished, and the portal vanished with him. "What just happened?" shouted Ritlock, his claws swiping the air. "Why did you say that?" Air said numbly, "I wanted him to stay." Snaff lay, embedded in the deepest layers of the dragon's mind, choking off breath and pulse. The dragon could not find him here, could not root him out. It could not even right itself. But its minions found Snaff elsewhere. There came a crash, stone shattering, and the rumble of claws. Claws dug, and jaws gibbered. Snaff opened his eyes. Big Snaff had toppled and shattered, and the monsters were on him. Fangs snapped, muzzles bled. Hungry, angry, insatiable. Teeth clamped on Snaff. They bit through him. There was blunt pain and the sudden certainty that he was dying. More teeth seized him, bones broke, breath burst through his wounds. Blood foamed out. Fangs met in his stomach. Ritlock was galloping toward the downed dragon when it suddenly rolled over and righted itself. Its holocaustal eyes glared down the length of the crater at the running Char, a stone lance in his claws. Then, Kraukatorix spread massive wings and beat them against the air and rose from what should have been its grave. "No!" roared Ritlock. The dragon lifted easily away and climbed into the sky. "No!" Ritlock bellowed, hurling the spear. It arced up, cracked off the shoulder of the beast, bounding away. The lance fell, useless, in the crater. Already, Kraukatorix was out of reach. Its mile-long wings thrummed the air, blasting flat every creature on the desert below. Ritlock Brimstone fell to his knees. Winds buffeted. The dragon retreated, unhearing, uncaring. Its wings boiled the clouds as it climbed. It ripped through them and rose, leaving only a troubled wake across the heavens. The sun shone brightly from the white walls of Divinity's Reach and from the white robes of the Seraph. They filled the street, marching to the slow cadence of a tight-strung drums. The snares crackled and the bass boomed. It was a funeral march. Each Seraph held one end of a pallet on which lay their fallen friends. 133 Seraph had died in the Ogre Revolt. One of them was Dylan Thackeray. Logan helped carry his pallet. It was light. The hyenas had been thorough. But Logan marched beneath a heavy weight. He had returned, but they were gone. All that was left was smashed crystals. He had failed his brother, and he had failed his friends. At least he hadn't failed his queen. Even so, the mirror-bright armour he wore, the plate mail of a captain of the Seraph, weighed heavily on Logan, as did the weapon at his belt. He'd given up his warhammer to wield his fallen brother's sword. The procession turned down the main avenue between high walls. The people of Divinity's Reach lined the way. Little girls solemnly cast flowers into the lane. How quiet this parade was. At least Logan was in Divinity's Reach now. At least he could defend his queen. And maybe in this city, he would never have to fight a Char again. Legionnaire Ritlock Brimstone stood guard on the curtain wall of the Black Citadel. It was not glamorous duty, but at least he was fighting for the right side again. When first he returned to the Blood Legion, he was stripped of rank and assigned menial work. An overseer called him traitor, and Ritlock killed him. That's how he became an overseer. Later, a legionnaire called him a deserter, and Ritlock killed him as well. That's how he became a legionnaire. Let a centurion call him a friend to humans, and Ritlock would rise again. He was no longer a friend to humans, especially not to Logan Thackeray. Ritlock spit from the top of the wall and watched the gobbet fall 100 feet down before smearing. Logan, who was now Queen Jenna's lapdog. Logan, who had corrupted a dungeon full of Char. Logan, who had made a fool out of Ritlock. He'd better hope the Seraph never fight the Blood Legion. At last, Zodja was back in Ratasum. She descended the stairs into Snaf's laboratory. Her gaze fell longingly on the half-finished golems lying there, the projects her master had left undone. Reaching the floor of the lab, Zodja set down the jar of ashes and lifted a pry bar. She levered up one of the large paving stones and used a shovel to dig into the ground beneath it. An hour of sweat and grit later, his grave was ready. "You'll always be here," she said to the jar. Then she lowered the ashes into the ground and shoveled dirt on top. Soon she slid the stone back into place. It boomed, the sound echoing from the wide walls. It was no longer Snaf's laboratory. It was hers now. Genius. At last. But she would never build golems the way Snaf had. No one ever would. They would try, of course, but they would fail. Snaf had been a one-of-a-kind genius, and he had taken the secrets of Power Stones to the grave with him. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. "Don't move!" Garm snapped his head upright, eyes blazing ferociously. "Stay exactly like that." He and Air had returned to Holbrook, to her long, disused workshop. Just now, Air was working on the wolf statue she had abandoned long ago, but she hadn't set a single chisel to the sculpture. She only stood there, holding her tools and staring at the thing. That's why it was so hard to stay still. Air sighed, shaking her head. "I can't see it." Garm lifted his eyebrows questioningly, but then tried to look straight ahead. "It's not in there. The statue isn't in there anymore." Air laid down her chisels and mallet and stepped up and shoved the rock over, smashing it to the workshop floor. Keith walked along the Dragon Brand, the wide swathe of destruction laid down by Kralkatorrik. Every once in a while, she would bend down and pull a large green crystal from the sands. "Dragon blood," she said, staring gladly at one such stone before sliding it into her pack. It was lonely work, wandering these desolate places, searching for the secrets of Kralkatorrik and the Elder Dragons. But it was even lonelier when she travelled to Holbrook, or Ratasum, or Divinity's Reach, or the Black Citadel, only to find that her one-time friends had become strangers. But they would be friends again. Someday they would join her. Someday they would fight the dragons again. Someday. This story began with a human soldier named Ronan, whom, while separated from his patrol, discovered a cavern filled with strange seed pods. This cavern was protected by terrible plant creatures, so he fled, clinging to a single seed to show his daughter when he returned home from war. But, upon his arrival, Ronan discovered the Massart had destroyed his village and murdered his family, leaving only ruined houses and mass graves. In agony, he planted the seed on their graves and swore never to return to battle. In the brilliant light of noon, a petal moved, a pod opened, a Sylvari rose, stretched, and hesitantly entered the world. The 12 firstborn, called by their mother's summons, stood breathlessly to greet their new brother. They had lived for so many years alone, believing that they were all the Sylvari would ever be. And now the awakening had begun again. Other pods in the garden moved softly, gaining ground but not yet ready to open. It was the first flowering of a new generation. "Welcome, brother," Aif greeted him, always the first with a question or a smile. She approached the stranger, holding out a cloak so he could wrap himself. "Do you know us?" another broke in. "Did you dream of us?" "Hush, Dagonet," Aif shushed her over-eager friend. "You'll frighten him." She turned to the sapling again and spoke in a gentle tone. "Like you, we are Sylvari. I am called Aif. What is your name?" "Name?" The newcomer considered the question for a moment. At last he said, "Cadian," but his tone was uncertain. He took the cloak and pulled it about his shoulders to ward off the sun. "What is this place?" Aif smiled and tousled the Sylvari's hair, sending soft black willow fronds dancing around his shoulders. "This is the grove, and she," Aif gestured toward the massive tree beneath whose branches they gathered, "is the pale tree. Our mother. Your mother too." Cadian regarded the tree curiously, finding no strangeness in the explanation. With a nod, he looked at Dagonet. "I did dream." The scholar brightened, snatching up a scroll and a quill. "Tell me of your dream. I have studied all of ours, but yours will be the first new dream in many years." Standing taller, Cadian offered a smile. "The first?" He looked around at the other pods, as yet unawakened. "Yes, I am the first, aren't I? None of the others in my dream have awakened. The pale tree must have wanted to see me right away. She knew that I was special. He puffed up like a dandelion. I am first. No, Cadian. You are second-born. A deeper voice intoned. Malamedes was a tall, slender Sylvari with smooth hair that shone in an iridescent colour like the wings of a dragonfly. His proud bearing was that of an ancient oak, massive branches unyielding against the storm. Second? Cadian frowned. Why am I second? I've awakened before the rest. We were here first. They gathered by the pale tree, and rain swelled on her upturned leaves, dripping in slow sparks to the earth below. Her roots cradled the firstborn that lay among them, his body covered in a dark blanket like moss over a grave. Malamedes was only sleeping, struggling against exhausting nightmares. From time to time he called out, and Cahedin soothed him, placing a damp compress to his forehead in the hope that he would find rest. The healer looked up to the others, face filled with worry. Will he survive? Or will he die? As Rhiannoc did? The question whispered in every heart, but it was Niam that gave it voice. The mother says he will live, Cahedin murmured, but it was little comfort. Malamedes had been beautiful, as graceful as a willow kneeling by a stream. Now his face bore the carved scars of ill treatment, and the branches of his once iridescent hair had been broken and pruned into splintered, colourless pieces. One leg was withered as if kept too long from the sun, and where his flesh-like bark still clung to the vines of his torso, there were 1,000 small holes. We must kill them all. Cadian's eyes flashed dark gold, and his hand clenched around the hilt of his sword. The Asura have offered peace. They did not realize that They thought that he was simply another of the strange plants of the deep Maguma, mimicking sentience, Aif told them. When they realized he was truly aware, they returned him to us. It is not enough! How will Malamedes find peace if he does not take revenge? Cahedin stared disapprovingly. Revenge? Revenge is not our way. Have you not studied Ventari's tablet? As the second-born lowered his head belligerently, Cahedin lectured, It is written, the only lasting peace is the peace within your soul. You should meditate on that, Cadian, and consider its meaning. Cadian glanced at Traherne, whose expression was as black as his own. No soldier would say such things. No one who had ever lifted a blade to stop oppression or placed themselves in danger to free innocence would say that revenge was unfitting. If Faolain and Kaith were here, they would argue his side. He was sure of it. Abruptly, Traherne looked up toward the spreading boughs. Yes, mother. He answered a whisper only he could hear. Chagrined, the necromancer unclenched his fists. The pale tree says we need to concentrate on our true enemy, the dragons. Every ally will be needed. Gritting his teeth, Traherne finished, We make peace with the Asura. Cadian was not sure what was more troubling, that Traherne had given in, or that the pale tree had spoken only to the firstborn. Following suit, he bent his head, as the mother wishes. Despite the signs of long-ago death, the slumbering ruins felt somehow alive, the hush and whisper of the tide below the cliff rising and falling like a sleeper's breath. Something low and shadowy, stinking of brine, cast a slender shadow among the crumbling rocks. Cadian watched it pass between the tilted walls and fragmented arches that must have been a chapel, saw it flicker where an altar once stood, marked where the shadow vanished away. Are you prepared? Niam murmured softly behind him, her frond-like hair rustling in the cold breeze. She drew her sword and checked its edge, finding it keen. Eager, silver eyes met his dark gold gaze. It is time to strike. Two others of an even younger generation than Cadian stood with her, both, like them, members of the Cycle of Noon. Cadian stepped away from the little edge on which he'd been crouched. They are ready for us. We must move cautiously. Together they crept down onto the beach and into the ruins, and there they found their quarry. Cadian's sword cleaved a crate in two with a single stroke. He spun the weapon expertly behind his back, blocking another creature's claw before snapping down to slice away the extended hand. A Krayt sorceress's unblinking eyes widened as she wove a thaumaturgic web of slaughter, and 2 of the Sylvari died in her flame. Fiercely, Cadian leapt toward her, his blade tearing through the Krayt's flesh. He left nothing behind but scale and scream. When the Krayt were dead, Niam and Cadian stood in the centre of the ruined chapel, blood on their blades and fierce smiles lighting their faces. A sound caught his attention, and he raised a hand for silence, slipping forward to the place where he had seen movement from above. Cadian tilted the altar aside, and the sound grew louder. Beneath the stone lay a cave, long ago flooded by the advance of the sea. There, in a sea cavern below the ruins, Krayt lay in hiding, unperturbed by the icy waters. But these were not warriors. This was a hatchery, filled with Krayt eggs and terrified young. He raised his sword to continue the extermination. "Cadian!" Niam said sharply. Cadian paused, looking at the leader of his cycle in confusion. "Leave them." "But they are Krayt. They are children." "Children." He frowned, for the word had little meaning. "You mean they are small?" "They are small, but they are Krayt. They will grow up to be large Krayt, and then we will kill them. Why not kill them now when it is easy and when they are undefended? It seems the wisest course of action. Otherwise, we risk losing more Sylvari lives when these return fully grown." "We must take that risk to give them a chance to change their ways," the firstborn said. "All things have a right to grow. The blossom is brother to the weed." Soberly, she put away her sword and pushed the altar back. Beneath it, Cadian could hear the snake scrambling, splashing away into the ocean tide. Again, the firstborn quote the tablet when I ask for logic, he growled beneath his teeth. I do not agree. Cadian stood high on a limb in the centre of the grove, listening to the stillness of night. Crickets chirruped here and there, and nightbirds uttered lonesome cries, each calling to their own, even as he called to something greater than himself. "Mother," Cadian murmured, raising his hands in gentle supplication. "I need you." The wind soothed the leaves at the top of the pale tree, and Cadian felt her presence. Softly, the mother murmured, "Son of my bough, what do you seek?" Wisdom. Tears touched his eyes, and he rubbed them roughly with the back of his hand. "I see the evil in the world. I am told to fight it, but the lessons of the tablet shackle me. They prevent me from doing what is right. We put down our weapons when we should go to the slaughter. We turn away from vengeance when we are wronged, even though our spirits cry out for it. We do not take what we desire, or kill whatever we wish, or use our strength to force the world to hear us. These things are within us when we awaken. Why do we turn away from those impulses? Why do we not follow our instincts? Always we justify our actions with this tablet. Why do we not do whatever we want?" The pale tree rustled softly. "The most effective path is not always the best one, sapling. As the firstborn have done, you must strive to be good." The words stung. "Who defines good? You? Ventari? Some dead human?" Cadian retorted. "The firstborn are not perfect." The pale tree paused, and for a while, Cadian thought she might not reply. Mist had risen upon the nearby brook before she spoke again. "Would you do evil in my name?" the pale tree sighed. "Would you cause devastation as the Char do? Or justify wickedness in the name of knowledge as the Asura do? No, Cadian. We come into this world to destroy the dragons. We must not lose ourselves in that challenge." "Have we not already lost ourselves, Mother? We are not centaurs or humans. Let me destroy the tablet, and we will see what it truly means to be Sylvari." There was no answer. As dawn rose and bathed the clearing in gold, Cadian realized that the tree would say no more. "She will not hear you." The quiet voice was feminine, but it was not the tree who spoke. Spinning, Cadian readied himself for battle, but froze when he saw Kaith, cold and still, standing in the last shadows of night. "She will not hear you," Kaith repeated. "I am the first of my he began, raising his voice in argument. Kaith shrugged and interrupted. "Why should she care? She has thousands of children now, Cadian. You are either firstborn, or you are simply Sylvari." A storm gathered upon his features. "I will never be one among many, Kaith, not even to the pale tree," he vowed, storming away. "I will make you hear me, mother, like it or not. When I am finished and you are free at last, then I will be first in your heart." Kaith lingered in silence and watched him go. We gather in nightmare. We look to the darkest part of our spirits, the covetous hand, the lying heart, the knife that betrays a friend. We call upon these, and we see their power. For what are we in the end if not creatures of power? It will take strength to defeat the dragons, and strength does not come by turning away any weapon, no matter how vicious or how cruel. We will use them all. Cadian lounged on his throne with a careless, prideful slouch. A crown of golden vine glittered on his forehead as courtiers bowed and whispered before him, hanging on Cadian's every word, their eyes as lightless as the space between the stars. We, the Sylvari, are the future. It is our time. We must leave behind the fears of awakening, let go the stone that weighs us down. We were born to be more than this. We were born with a darkness in our dream and in our heart that we could embrace. If only the mother were not so afraid of the night. It is time to show her that her children are more than even she has dreamed we could be. If the Sylvari are to survive, we must learn from the poison thorn and the stinging nettle, the vine that crushes the very sapling which holds it to the light. We will raise the nightmare. We will see Tyria remade in our image. We will grow until nightmare swallows the world. "You're a coward. You're a fool." Blades rang from their scabbards with the shrill sound of anger, and only the claws of the Iron Legion Centurion kept blood off the field. "Stand down, both of you," the commander roared, his black eyes bored into the unruly troopers, and the two scrappers slowly put their swords away. "I've got 6 warbands to organize, soldiers, and I can't waste my time babysitting yours. Get your tails in gear. 5 years you've been fighting like this. Kill each other already, or stop wasting my time." Legionnaire Via Splitveins' fists clenched. She snarled in barely controlled obedience. "Fine, but if this sniveling, white-jawed weakling tries to tell me what to do one more time. If I don't tell you and you blunder into an ambush, then it's on your head." The other Char, a smaller male of the Ash Legion, rolled his claws over the hilts of his white-handled daggers. "You and your Blood Legion warband will be turned into branded monsters," he sneered. "Then again, being corrupted by a dragon might actually make you more pleasant, Via." Via raged forward again, but the Centurion still stood in her way. "Uncalled for, Feros!" The Centurion pushed them both back. "Back off!" Jabbing a thick finger into the black-garbed scout's chest, the Centurion said viciously, "Your duty, Ash Trash, is to escort this warband through Foulblane Expanse to Keenar Fort. If you can't do that, then get me someone that can." Feros, benighted, growled low in his throat and let go of his weapons. "Fine. I promise I'll see them through the brand. Just keep that lunatic off my back." "Fine," Via echoed. "Show me the path, then stay out of my way." A storm raged at the brand. Lightning flashed here and there, illuminating slithering, crystalline things roaming the corrupted plains. A lone Char warband marched across the shifting sand, boots treading over ground too treacherous and constantly changing to map. Feros paused, holding up one fist to signal a silent halt. The Blood Legion warband instantly froze in place. Via smelled the air, catching no more than a faint hint of danger. After a moment, the scout slunk back to them, crawling over the broken rocks to whisper, "Hostiles up ahead. Looks like trouble." He sketched a quick map in the sand, indicating location, distance, and number. "They've already got our scent." "Then it's killing time." Via's eyes narrowed. She glanced back at her warband, friends since childhood. Their faces were drawn and stiff. They knew the danger. The flat land ahead was solid, even. It would make an excellent place to fight. "Prepare assault. 2 on the rear, the rest with me. At my signal." 4 massive creatures crested the hill. They were hideous, twisted by the energies of the brand. Judging by their malformed skulls and huge clawed paws, the monstrosities might once have been bears or mountain cats. Now, they were nothing but twisted shells filled with a dragon's murderous hatred. 4. Far more than they could handle. She wasn't even sure the warband could defeat 1. Via didn't realize she'd taken a step back until she felt Ferris's hand on her forearm, quietly steadying her balance. "You all right?" he asked. His voice was low, and her quick ears barely caught his meaning. "They're big." She whispered the trembling words before she realized she'd spoken. Stiffening, Via pulled her arm away as if his hand were a hot coal pressed against her skin. She reached for her sword. "Don't be such a coward, Ferris. We can take him." Ferris smiled, an expression not particularly different from his snarl. "We can sure as hell try." "Get up, soldier!" Via roared to the last of her warband. She caught a corrupted monster's massive claws on her shield and tried to respond with a sword blow. The glazed look in her fallen companion's eye told the tale. He was dead, like the others. Brothers and sisters of the Farah that had fought by her side since childhood. Despite the 3 beasts they'd down, 1 slayed by Via alone, she could not stop the onslaught of the 4th. Her body ached and the weapon in her hand felt heavier with each attack. Via's shield shattered, raining torn iron and chips of wood across her muzzle. She staggered back and swung her blade fiercely, trying to ward off the enemy until her vision cleared. 1 wide slash, 2, but her weapon struck nothing. Via opened her eyes, fearing the worst, just in time to see the monstrous brand creature stagger and collapse. A white-handled dagger had pierced its crystalline heart. Ferris stood between her and the beast, his body clawed open from shoulder to tail. He managed to snarl as he fell to his knees. "Fool." Ignoring her own injuries, Via went to his side, tearing off her cloak and ripping it into strips to bind his wounds. Annoyed, the scout weakly swiped at her hands. "Let me die. Go, before the smell of blood brings others." "Coward," she snarled, tying the knots tighter. "Giving up on a fight?" "I'm cut bad, Via." "You'll get better," she lied. Ferris took a deep breath. "Fine, but we're getting out of here. If you carry me, I'll show you the way." "No." Her hands paused over the bandage ties. "If you move, you'll bleed out. I'll go. I'll bring someone back for you. Less than a day." The Ash Legion soldier snorted in disgust. "You go alone and you won't make it out at all. All 3 of us will die. It's this way, or none at all." Ferris closed his eyes in laboured pain. When he opened them again, his snarl had returned. "I promised I'd see you clear of this place, you blood-brained idiot. That I will." It only took a breath to make her decision. She hoisted the Ash Legion soldier onto her back. Ferris clamped his arms around her neck. With no further discussion, they headed north toward Kina. The young primus of the Farah raised an eyebrow when he saw a blood legionnaire striding toward the pits. Her wounds had not yet healed from a trip through the brand, and trails from massive claws were still fresh on her body. In her arms, she held a dark-furred cub, not more than 2 weeks old. "Blood Legion?" the primus scoffed. "This is an Ash Farah." "I know where I am," the warrior snarled fiercely, baring her teeth. "Take the wretched thing and be done." Despite her words, she held onto her cub for a moment longer, brushing back the fur from his ears and letting the baby tug playfully at a clawed finger. Who's the father? The Ash Primus asked curiously. His answer was served with a sharp glare. None of your business, Ash trash. She looked down at the cub one more time before placing him gently in the Primus's arms. He was one of yours. That's all you need to know. The Primus laid the babe with the others, the warband it would one day rely upon. Does the cub have a name? He asked cautiously, calling to the Blood Legion warrior as she walked away. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. Veros, she grunted. The Blood Legion warrior rested her hand on her white-handled dagger that hung at her belt. And Primus? Tell him his father was a coward. After a moment, she murmured softly, then make sure he turns out the same way. Via lowered her head as if shouldering a burden, and silently left the Farah. Lieutenant Serentine knelt beside the body of the minister, careful not to cut herself on the broken slivers of glass that surrounded his right hand. A shattered goblet lay in fragments across the cobblestones of the alley. Shards twinkled in the light of her lantern. She turned over a piece of glass cautiously and watched a bit of red wine stain the stone beneath. What had the minister been doing in the poor area of Divinity's Reach? Who was responsible for his death? Lieutenant? One of her men stepped into the end of the alley, saluting. Serentine looked back over her shoulder and arched a brow. He shifted uncomfortably in his red livery, the symbol of the Ministry Guard blazoned on his chest. The Seraph are demanding control of the crime scene. The Seraph? She rose from her crouch, adjusting the warhammer on her back. They have no jurisdiction. A minister has been murdered. This is a ministry issue. Murdered while he was inside the walls of Divinity's Reach. A news speaker pushed aside the Ministry Guard and strode down the alley toward her. That's clearly our area of concern. He was handsome, sandy brown hair hanging lightly across his coppery eyes. Lieutenant Serentine. He greeted her as an afterthought. She narrowed her eyes. Captain Thackeray? Taking a personal interest? He was murdered by bandits in our city streets. You bet your hammer I am. The poison in the wine was difficult to track, but unusual enough to make a positive identification. Smugglers, no doubt working on behalf of the bandits, had gotten it to the inn. But what had caused Minister Brios to go there in the first place? Serentine paced the wide halls of the ministry chamber, avoiding the peasants who scuttled along on business here or there. They did not concern her, only the safety of the ministers did. Something had to have drawn Brios downtown, something important enough for him to go quickly, and shady enough that he didn't bring a guard. Had he been engaging in treason? It was possible. More than a few ministers were on record with the belief that the treaty with the Char was foolhardy, throwing away victories and condemning Ascalon to Char rule forever. Opening the door to Brios' office with her master key, Serentine stepped inside. She ruffled through every scrap of information she could find, digging through his desk unreservedly. Receipts, dinner invitations, missives from Ascalon settlement, the area that Minister Brios represented, and scraps of notes from various ministry sessions. Nothing personal, nothing that named the inn or implied a reason for him to leave the safety of his apartments. Take the schedule book and seize any classified files, she ordered the two guards that followed her. One of you stay on door duty here, and the other... Before she could finish her sentence, Serentine's eye fell once more on a piece of paper that she discounted in her initial search. An invitation to afternoon tea with the Countess Anise, dated the same day as Brios' death. Anise, Serentine frowned, master exemplar of the Shining Blade. But if Brios had been considering treason, how did he walk away from a meeting with the Queen's Guard? I'm sorry, Lieutenant, the Countess smiled. I can't tell you anything else about Brios. Can't, Serentine pressed the issue, or won't? We talked about gardening. He was an enthusiast. The Countess shrugged, auburn hair moving softly against pale shoulders. What else could I say? Gritting her teeth, Serentine resisted the urge to make demands. I see. And when he left this tea, where was he going? How would I know? Anise smiled ruefully. We weren't exactly close. It's a pity what happened. I expect it will take some time for his successor to be appointed, and the vote on funding for the carnival will have to be postponed. Brios was such a supporter of the people. A shame. Ah, well, will there be anything else, Lieutenant? Sarantine knew a dismissal when she heard one. No, ma'am. Bowing brusquely, she turned on her heel and strolled out of the palace. First, the Seraph tried to seize authority. Then, the Shining Blade put up political roadblocks to stop the investigation. There was only one place Sarantine could turn. Kneeling, Lieutenant Sarantine placed her warhammer on the ground. Thank you for seeing me, sir. Rise, Sarantine. His voice held the wisdom of many years, bolstered by the strength of solemnity. Tell me, guardswoman, how can I help you? Legate Minister Cordicus frowned in gentle concern. I don't know where else to turn, sir. A minister has been murdered, and it seems as if the Queen herself is hampering my investigation. Sarantine hated saying it, even thinking it, but she knew that she could trust him. I have been ordered to turn the case and all evidence over to Thackeray and his Seraph. Ah, Lieutenant. Cordicus patted her shoulder gently. It is not our place to question Queen Jenna. Do as you are ordered. I'll make sure the ministers know the guard is not at fault. Without you, it is likely that Brios' murderer will never be discovered or brought to justice. The Seraph are incompetent, but the Queen's infatuation for that simple-minded captain blinds her to the country's needs. I will write to Minister Brios' family and see that they have money for their needs. In this time of trials, we must all do we can for one another. Nevertheless, Kryta will win through, as we ever have. Minister Cordicus smiled reassuringly. Just leave everything to me. In the depths, surrounded by the very foundations of Tyria, a battle was raging. Impact rocked the narrow passage, sending showers of earth and pebbles scattering along the uneven floor. Screeching, high-pitched sound filled the corridor, shaking more dust loose with every bone-jarring pulse and waver. Flattening his ears close to his neck, Dlix dashed through the wreckage with his decrystalline etherizer close at hand. I know you're coming in, Dlix! A voice shouted from up ahead, barely rising over the din. I'm a sonographic engineer. Did you think I wouldn't hear you? Ha! Dlix saw the wave approaching before it hit him, a wobbly-looking motion in the air that signaled the solid wash of sound. He dove behind a boulder, but the assault struck him even as he leapt for cover. With a waft of terrible howling, whining cacophony, the sound wave spun him end over end until he slammed against the caravan wall. Oof! He grunted, but the noise of his protest was lost amid the din. See that? The voice shouted again. Nothing's getting through my sonopath. Whoever holds it is immune to it, and Skrit have delicate ears. You hear me? Delicate! Dlix rolled out into the hallway, etherizer pointed, focused, and ready. The ball of crystal at its end flared with a strange, pinkish gleam, and then a light shot toward the end of the hallway. Ew! The voice faded, and then there was the thud of an unconscious body hitting the stone floor. Seizing his opportunity, Dlix shoved the etherizer into his belt and raced forward. Leaping over barriers made of stone, debris, and broken furniture, he landed solidly over an unconscious Asura woman, still twitching a bit from the effects of the etherizer ray. Hanging on her back, above her, was a half-cocked sonic generator, modified from bits and pieces of original dredge rig. If I hadn't had earplugs, that would have killed me. Not bad, Poisey. Dlix reached up and pulled the torque abjurer from the sonic generator, deactivating the device. He paused to breathe on the copper-coloured abjurer and polished it against his sleeve as the machine wound down. Once the noise faded, he popped the earplugs out of his ears and smiled. But not good enough. He snapped the abjurer in half and peered inside curiously. No, Poisey managed, her voice wavery with the after-effects of his etherizer. My sonopath will get me out of here. I don't want to die. I'm not taking your gadget. Dlix pushed the abjurer into Poisey's pocket. I came to get something else. Carefully, Dlix reached down and removed her left shoe. With cautious hands, he tucked it away into his knapsack, pausing to stare at her. He bent down a second time and also took the long scarf Poisey wore around her neck. This too, I think, Delix muttered. Why can you leave me alone? Poisey moaned, her eyes rolling in half-conscious annoyance. Just go away! Delix stood, drawing his coat close around his body. You're a member of my crew, Poisey, he snarled. Did you expect me to forget that? With a dismissive snort, he turned, drew his decrystalline etherizer into his hand once more, and vanished away into the dark passages of the Earth. Earth rumbled and moved, displacing itself, churning in ever-growing spirals of shattered stone. Behind the Jurassic Earth carver, Nim pushed and grunted, struggling to shove the implement more quickly through the wall. It was larger than he, coiled to a point at the fore and flat at the rear, like the stylized claw of some giant beast, or like that massive tooth the idiot Norn worshipped up in the frozen mountains. Nim scowled, shoving with all his might as the cone-shaped digging device rolled and rocked and did its work. With each shove, the earth carver dug forward and Nim crawled after, not caring if the passage behind him was half sealed with rubble in his wake. That would be a defense against anything sneaking up behind him. A genius idea. Foo on the rest of them, those idiots in that Cog's cursed crew. He was getting himself out. A shudder rippled through the ground, shaking Nim so badly that it tilted his trajectory 3 degrees to the south. He cursed and quickly flipped the earth carver off to investigate. Had he overloaded the joint welders? Flooded the arcanolog? Nothing. Maybe the problem was with that talismanic stabilizer. Another shudder. That one definitely wasn't caused by his machine. Nim pushed his goggles up onto his forehead, listening carefully, his black eyes narrowing against the single clean strip of skin across his face. Poisey's stupid sonopath, he guessed. Idiot. She'll just draw attention. Better to sneak along and not be noticed. Turning the earth carver on again, Nim put his shoulder to the rear harness and shoved with all his might. With a mighty effort, he drove the spinning drill through the next layer of rock. As the stone cracked and fell apart, Nim cheered, only to turn his cry into a scream as the rock, earth carver and all, suddenly tipped forward with a burst of unimpeded speed. No! He screamed, grabbing for the handles on the rear of the machine. A cavern! My calculations must have been off! I should still be in pyromorphic The sound of chittering rose and swelled beyond the opening as the ground crumbled beneath him, threatening to collapse completely. Forced to release the handles to save his own life, Nim scrambled backward, but found himself quickly trapped by the rubble he'd left in his wake. Thick cracks splintered the foundation, and Nim saw his fate spread out before him. A blanket of thousands of scrits, and all of the little monsters was staring up at the fresh, new hole in their city wall. Across the big cavern, Nim could see the twinkle of daylight, a way out. But he'd never get there. Even if he didn't fall to his doom, there was easily 1,000 rodent men in the way. The stone cracked and groaned, just as the last shards of rock holding him up collapsed. A rope, no, a scarf, flumped down to hang in the air beside him. Poisey! Nim gasped, reaching for it with joy. He clung desperately to the thin thread of hope as the earth carver toppled down to shatter on the floor of the Skrit city cave. Poisey! Nim scrambled up the scarf to a ledge further up the wall. Crawling over the lip, he faced the Asura there with glee. You saved me! I knew that being on the same crew still meant something to you, Poisey. With a gasp, Nim froze. You! Delix smiled, leveling the decrystalline etherizer. If I shoot you with this, you'll topple down into our vicious little friends. You know how clever they are when they're all bunched up like that. And there's never been as many of them together as there are here in Skritsburg, I'll wager. Slowly, Nim raised his hands in a gesture of submission. Master Boyk didn't know what he was doing coming down here. We don't have to end up like him. I'm afraid we do. Now, give me your shoe, and I'll be on my way. Gulping, Nim shook his head. I won't help you. Whatever you're doing, you won't get away with it, Glix. One of us will make it to the surface. One of us already has. With that, Delix pulled the trigger, and the ball of crystal flared. Nim's body tensed, arcing, But at the last moment, Delix grabbed the other Asura by the belt and jerked him away from the open height. Below, 1,000 bright eyes flashed viciously in the darkness, and 1,000 hissing whispers echoed against the stone. Leaning Nim's unconscious body safely against the cavern wall, Delix slid off Nim's shoe and shoved it into his belt bag with the one he'd taken from Poisey. "Only one member of the crew left," he muttered, checking a tracking light on his bracer. "No time to waste." Tick, tick, tick. Vola knelt by the spherical hydrocatabic distillery, pushing her long, coiled braids back as she tweaked the dials and reset the aura transversers. She hummed to herself, her body swaying back and forth as she checked and double-checked, each one with the remote in her hand to be certain it was just right. Delix's hand squeezed tightly on the handle of his decrystalline etheriter. The bomb was complete, pre-triggered, and she'd used more than enough crystalline pyretics to trigger the entire layer. But he was in luck. She'd left her boots on the table near the door. 10, 10, no, this one goes to 11. There we are. She grinned, showing long rows of razor-sharp teeth. "All right, Vola?" Delix called out from the hidden aperture in the floor of the subterranean cavern, keeping his tone smooth and overly gentle. "Stand up slowly, back away, toward me, and keep your hands in the air." She spun, far more quickly than he thought was safe, and Delix winced. That distillery was explosive by the alchemy. "Delix!" she squealed delightedly, shoving the remote into her vest. "I thought you were dead, like old, what's his name?" "Master Boyk," he supplied grimly. "No, Boyk's just fine. He's used a personal transporter the moment we stumbled onto the Skrit city." "Personal transporter?" Vola mused, rocking back and forth on the balls of her feet. Her coiled braids swayed gently around well-shaped and smoothly moving ears. "That's a snaf device, isn't it?" Boyk was such an idea thief. She raised a hand and stroked her ears lightly, letting the tips of her fingers press gently over a delightfully wide forehead. "Eyes on the prize, Delix," he snarled to himself, trying not to let her know he'd been staring. Too late. Vola winked. "Come on, Delix. You know full well it's every Asura for herself down here." She took a winsome step toward him, and he could smell the intoxicating aroma of fuel oil and particular ozone. "I could take you with me if you like. We were on the same crew, after all." Shaking himself out of it, he raised his etheriter, again with a snap. "We were. But if I let you set off that distillery, we'll be on the same dead crew." "Come on, climb on top of it with me. I've set up a jail platform." She took another step toward him, her eyes brilliant and filled with 1,000 complex mathematical equations. "A force bubble will surround us. The distillery will go off, and we'll be shot straight up to the surface without so much as a scuffle on your broad," another step, "cosmonetic," another step, and now her lips were inches from his, "toolbox." With a swift movement, Vola snatched the etheriter out of his hand and stepped back. "Fool!" she said victoriously. "I win." There was only room for one on that jail platform, wasn't there, Vola? Delix asked sadly as she backed away, still holding the weapon fiercely toward his face. "You've never even considered taking anyone else along? When you set off that distillery, it'll collapse the caverns. If the Skrit don't kill us, your bomb will." "Like I care," she snapped. "I'm the genius here. Me, not you, and not those other simpletons. When I get back to Ratasum, I'll tell them how bravely you and all the others died when we discovered this massive infestation. And I'll be sure to explain to Master Boyk that it's in his best interest to give me the credit. Or I'll ruin the Witherbrain for not realizing the rats were here in the first place." Still holding his etheriter, she grinned and leapt to the distillery platform as if she was standing atop the world. "Now all I have to do is press the button on my remote." Vola fumbled in her vest. "This remote?" Delix held it up. "You!" She leveled the etheriter and fired, and a lovely mist of lavender-scented vapor shot out, perfuming the room. "Give me that back! I can't set off the distillery without it!" she wailed. As pleasantly scented smoke filled the area, Delix yelled, "You never could tell the difference between a decrystalline etheriter and a decrystalline etherizer, Voller." Taking advantage of the mist and the distance between them, Delix snatched one of Voller's boots from the table and dropped down through the aperture, fleeing into the caverns below. Delix crouched at the base of the golem, slowly inserting each shoe into its canoptic non-abstract analyzation bay. 4 shoes in all, one from each member of his crew, followed by his own, slid down the gullet of the mighty, if rough-hewn, stone defender. "Processing," the golem chirruped, its voice bubbling up, raw and scratchy, from the gleaming crystal epicenter. "Processing. Understood. Targets acquired." Delix stood up and patted the golem with a wide smile, wincing only slightly as his affectionate tap caused a single stone to fall off. He quickly reattached it. "Come on, BEMM. Time to show your stuff," Delix said. The golem stepping forward, its massive armaments aglow in the dimness of the underground. By the time they burst out into the main script cavern, it was already a free-for-all. The war golem's crystals flashed and shimmered, bolts flying in every direction. It was a rabid explosion of destruction, uncontrolled and completely unhampered by any attempt at silly things like aiming or conservation of energy. On the ledge above, Poisey and Nim screamed. Bolts flew through them, striking them solidly, but where Skrit toppled over, screaming and squirming, the 2 Asura suffered no damage at all. "What's going on?" Nim howled, curling his hands around his goggles. "How is he doing that?" Poisey pointed to the entrance where Delix and the BEMM stood. The war golem's arms spun wildly as rays radiated through the mass of Skrit. "I don't care, just run!" Using her scarf to slide down into the huge cavern, Poisey and Nim fled past the terrified, twitching rat folk. Within moments, Delix saw them climb up the far wall and through the opening into the sunlight above. "So that's why you needed the shoes," Voller murmured behind him. Her voice sent shivers up his spine, even more than the howling and shrieking of the rodent men. "They've got our sweat on them. You used that matter, part of ourselves, to attune the golem's rays so that it wouldn't hurt us." Inspired. Delix shot her a glance, but did not answer, a smarmy grin curling his lips. "You could have gotten out any time," she pressed, stepping closer as pinkish rays flew all around them. "Why? Why help us? Because we're all on Master Boyk's crew?" "You don't stop being on a crew till the job's done. The job was to come down here, measure the resonant spell power, and then return. We hadn't returned," Delix said and shrugged. "Crew is crew." "Was that your only reason?" "That," he agreed. "And the fact that now, every single one of you will be forced to praise the Asura whose invention saved your lives." He puffed up, spinning his decrystalline etherizer around one finger with an expert touch. "Delix, inventor of the better mousetrap mass trauma war golem, graduate of the College of Dynamics, bane of Skrit, everywhere. Me." The fire blew sparks toward the heavens like stars seeking to return to their high, dark home. But there was no joy in this blaze, no celebration. What had once been a proud lodge was now little more than piles of ash huddled in the shadows of flickering, ember-lit logs. "I'm sorry, Viscar." The old Skald placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "There is nothing we can do. Your father lost the house and everything in it on his last wager with Grimhilda. She had the right to do whatever she chose with her winnings." She cheated, but I can't prove it. What of my father, Fiok?" The youth snarled the words, biting off the syllables like a wolf gnawing its leg out of a trap. "Did she have the right to kill him too?" Old Fiok sighed. He was wrong to attack her. There will be no retribution from the Wolfborn of Holbrak for Grimhilda's actions. Nor should you seek vengeance upon her, Viscar. You are a new hunter, barely old enough to bear your own blade. Grimhilda is powerful, and legends of her cruelty are told at the moot to frighten children and humans. Shaking his head, The Skald pulled a leopard fur cloak closer about his weary bones. Put away your anger, young one. Bury your father. Leave this matter to the crows. No! Viscar wiped away his tears with the back of his hand, leaving soot stains across pale cheeks. I may be young, Fiach, and I may be inexperienced, but I am still Norn. The stars above the Shiver Peaks were cold and bright, crowned by the iridescent borealis of the northern sky. In the great lodge of Holbrook, a youth stood before the shamans and sought lessons of revenge. No, said the shaman of Bear. Learn strength, Viscar. Learn wisdom. Grimhilda does not seek victory. She seeks the utter annihilation of her enemy. I will not teach you to throw away your life. I am sorry, said Wolf's followers. We would gladly help you avenge your family, but what you propose is suicide. Think of your pack. If you attack Grimhilda, she will punish those you love. The Havroon of Raven shook his head when Viscar asked, You cannot even tell me how she cheated. Grimhilda is clever, and she always has a lethal surprise for her enemies. If you do not know more than she does, she will destroy you. Viscar clenched his fists. Will no one help me? A shadow moved in the corner of the lodge, and yellow eyes gleamed. You haven't asked me yet, murmured the speaker of Snow Leopard, Valrantha, her movements smooth and graceful. Will Snow Leopard teach me to take vengeance? He asked. If I follow her path, will she show me how to defeat Grimhilda? More. Valrantha lowered her eyes and smiled. She will turn your vengeance into legend. Grimhilda knelt, studying the tracks. She'd been following them for 6 days, since the Skalds in Holbrook sung the legend of Whisperclaw, a fierce young mountain cat. Soon she would challenge the beast and... Grimhilda! A voice called from the mountainside above. With a start, she reached for her weapon. Had someone come before her? Was her prey dead by another's hand? In anger, the warrior straightened and peered up into the crags. She did not have to wait long to see her enemy. Who are you? She asked cautiously, fingering the blade on her axe. If this stripling had stolen her prize, she would make him pay, with pain. I am your death, walking. The youth stood on a high ledge, balancing effortlessly. 4 years ago, you cheated my father of his life. I am here to avenge that debt. I remember you now. Grimhilda stepped backward and swept her axe from side to side. Your father was a weak little thing, as are you. I should have slain you as a child, but that old man talked me out of it. No matter, I will deal with you, and when I return to the Great Lodge, I will end that relic of a storyteller as well. The youth snarled, eyes bright with cold, bitter revenge. You've come here to hunt, he said, but you're the one being hunted. It's 6 days back to Holbrook, over ice and snow, with no safe haven, no lodges or campgrounds along the way. You think to fight me? She laughed. Kill me, Grimhilda the Ferocious, the mightiest axe-wielder among the Norn? You will die, mewling like a kitten, young one. You're not powerful enough. You're right. I'm not powerful enough to face you on your terms, so I'll face you on mine. The young hunter smiled wickedly. Snow Leopard trained me in stealth and tracking. She also taught me to steel my mind against slumber. I can go 5 days without resting. I'll die after 6, but I'll do it if I must. But you have to sleep sometime, and I'm willing to bet my life that you'll rest before I do. Grimhilda stared at him, the blood draining from her face. You would kill me in my sleep? I will wait until my prey is at her weakest, and then I will strike. The youth hunter smiled grimly, and by Snow Leopard I swear, you will never hear me coming. Let me tell you a tale. Old Fiach the Skald raised his hands to the sky as the fires of the moot crackled and leapt. The story of the hero known as Viscar Whisperclaw. Hail the Honor Son, rightful Rage Tender, Shadows Striker, Slayer of treasonous Grimhilda. Viscar, who despite all challenges, was willing to give his life to claim blood debt from the one who had done him harm. The Norn believe in personal strength, individual victory, and an earthly spirituality that is both primal and complex. They revere the spirits of nature, embodied in animals that are both guardians and the essence of the world. It can be said that there are probably as many spirits of the wild as there are basic types of animals. One spirit of wolf to embody all wolves, one spirit of Doliac to teach the lessons of strength and perseverance, and so on. Unlike the human gods, these spirits of the wild do not represent high-minded concepts like war or nature, but instead embody all the complex virtues and vices of the animals they represent. Because of their history, the four most important spirits of the wild to the residents of the Great Lodge of Holbrack are bear, snow leopard, raven, and wolf. These spirits manifested themselves to lead the Norn survivors south after their northern homelands were ravaged by the rise of the elder ice dragon Jormag. Bear is the most revered of all the spirits, and she is seen as an icon of strength, insight, and wisdom. Snow Leopard is a solitary, stealthy spirit, much like her animal kin, and the Norn respect the secrets she collects. Raven is the cunning trickster, who loves riddles and wordplay, and Wolf is the spirit of teamwork, friendship, and family. Norn choose to follow the path of a certain spirit of the wild because they feel a kinship to the lessons it teaches. It is important to note that simply because the four spirits work together to help the Norn survive Jormag's attacks does not mean that they, or their followers, are always on the best of terms. Followers of Wolf scorn Snow Leopard's stealth as cowardice, and the shamans of Bear have been known to mistrust Raven's adherents, calling their deceptions dishonorable and weak. Tales of epic battles between heroes of each lodge are told at moots, immortalizing in legend both the virtues and vices embodied by their patron spirits. Unlike humans, whose priests are revered for their dedication to one god, all Norn feel equally guided and befriended by the spirits. Some Norn don't follow a particular path, preferring instead to revere all the spirits of the wild, following each whenever its lessons are relevant in their day-to-day lives. Those who choose to become shamans devote themselves to a spirit's sacred area, a shrine, lodge, or hunting ground dedicated to their patron spirit of the wild. They serve their people as guardians and teachers, protecting their territory and instructing others in the lessons of the spirit they revere. 4 of the most powerful and dedicated shamans are known as the Speakers of Holbrack. They tend to the 4 lodges that flank Holbrack's main hall, which were raised in honour of the spirits that led the Norn to safety. The wise Alarin of the Frostborn speaks for Bear's Lodge. Moda the Black is Raven's learned speaker. The Wolf Lodge is kept by a young speaker named Fastav Jortherson. The beautiful and mysterious Valorantha is the speaker of Snow Leopard. Shamans can be found across the Shiver Peaks, and even in far-flung areas, but one special type of shaman, known as a Havroon, is far less common. A Havroon is a special servant of the spirit, a vigilant and active defender of the spirit's interests in both this world and the next. Havroons have the unique ability to physically cross into the mists and go to the Hall of the Spirits, where the brave live forever. They do not need to open a portal or perform a ritual unless they are taking others with them. Alone, they simply step into the spirit realm, sending their spirit into the mists as easily as crossing Hearthstone. There is only one Havroon per spirit of the wild. There may be another in training, if the current Havroon has grown old or wary and is preparing for their final crossing into the mists. Primarily, the Norn of Holbrack revere the 4 spirits of the wild that led them south. But other spirits exist and teach lessons of their own. Some are less powerful, such as Minotaur, Worm, or Eagle, and they are rarely seen or called upon. Some spirits are not sentient, such as Mountain, Fire, or Darkness, and are depicted as challenges to strive against, or legendary obstacles placed in a hero's path, rather than friends or guides like the spirits of the wild. There is also a small group of spirits that are revered with great sorrow. These lost spirits of the wild remained behind to fight Jormag. Owl, Doliak, also known as Ox, Eagle, and Wolverine are lauded for their bravery and their sacrifice. Owl's death is known to the Norn. The last Havrun of Owl confirmed it. But as to the final outcome of Doliak, Eagle, and Wolverine, even the shamans do not know. No Norn has been blessed to serve as Havrun to those spirits in generations. But then, it is not uncommon for weaker spirits, or those who are not close to this world, to be without a Havrun. All that is truly known is that these spirits held the line in the far north and, by their bravery, aided the Norn in escaping Jormag's claws. Since the rise of Jormag, there are those among the Norn, always young, male, and eager to prove themselves, who claim that Dragon should be revered among the spirits of the wild. They admire Jormag's strength, its viciousness, and its cruelty. They claim that, by following the path of Dragon, a Norn can become as undefeatable as the dragon itself. They look at the tale of Jorah and her brother Svanir, and see him as the first convert to the new spirit. Jorah, who did not accept Dragon's blessings, is reviled among their cult, as are all women. Interestingly, Jormag does not show the same bias as its Sons of Svanir followers. It's been known to corrupt all races and all genders. Dragon has no true shaman, no Havrun. Those who follow it do not have the ability to go into the mist on its behalf, nor do they have the gifts Norn expect to see in shamans of the spirits of the wild. A dragon shaman may think he is spiritual, but he falls woefully short of the real thing. These advocates of the dragon teach only corruption. They are given foul blessings. They are changed forever by Jormag. In the end, they too become ice-brewed and serve the beasts. They may call themselves shamans, but most consider them fools, dangerous ones. Still, the promise of power and the challenge to be the one that masters the dragon's gifts continues to lure arrogant, driven young Norn into Dragon's service. Norn culture stresses individuality. It demands that a person be judged by their own actions, not by the actions of a group to which they belong. If 3 Sons of Svanir attack a shrine, those individuals are hunted down and punished. That does not mean another Norn who claims to be part of the Sons of Svanir will be punished or treated badly because of the event. In the Norn mindset, he didn't do it, so he isn't to be blamed. This doesn't mean that the Norn ignore a person's allegiances, or that they don't understand Sons of Svanir are dangerous people. It's simply that, as a race, Norn do not judge an individual for the sins of his tribe. A Norn lives and dies by her own legend. No race weaves the thread of life. We're all strands in it, seeds upon the earth, inheritors of nature's balance. They first appeared in the world as rumours, as legends. Travellers told tales of great ships made of ice and bedecked with sails glimpsed among the fjords. Then, Norn hunters returned with more stories of white-furred bear men, unlike those Norn blessed by bear, who possessed great power, but who were also filled with great fear. They were fleeing the north, the land of the elder ice dragon, Jormag. They were creatures of wisdom and judgment, weighing the races of Tyria and finding them wanting. They were the Codon. The Codon are intelligent, 10-foot-tall, bipedal, polar bear-like beings from the distant north. Culturally, they have a strong belief in the importance of being in balance with the world around them, but this does not mean they're pacifists. Taking a cue from the natural world, they see hunting and killing as a normal part of life. What is most important is that an individual's actions are in balance with nature. Originally from beyond the northern Shiver Peaks, the Codon tribes inhabit floating iceberg fortresses called sanctuaries, one per tribe. They live and travel upon these mighty ice peaks, building entire cities within their shelter. Long ago, Codon, the Ancient One, founder of the earth, keeper of the sky, formed the world. In the beginning, the spirits of the world were wild and untamed. In time, many took physical form: spirits of stone, spirits of water, spirits of wind, spirits of soil, spirits of plants and birds and creeping things. All things with form have spirits, as do many formless things. But one day the bear stood up and looked around him and saw that the spirits of the world were restless and chaotic. He could not understand the endless cycles of creation and destruction, and so Bear was the first creature to speak, and with his first words he asked Codon, "Why is this so?" And Codon was pleased and made this offer to the bear: "If you would watch and learn, then watch and learn, and you shall protect and guide the spirits of this world." And those who praised Codon and accepted this offer became the Codon, and those who were not ready and did not wish to be changed remained as bears. When the great storm had finally passed, the Codon saw their gift from Codon. Great sections of the seas had frozen, creating floating islands of ice, and the Codon climbed onto these, and so now could live upon the land and the sea. And they watched, and they learned, and they hunted. The Codon build and maintain cities of ice known as sanctuaries. These sanctuaries float on restless seas far to the north, beyond the lands where the Norn have travelled. These sanctuaries are spiritual havens as well as shelters, and at their icy core, the voices live in shrines to Codon. In order to teach enlightenment, maintain a sense of distance from the world, and meditate on Codon's true wishes, each sanctuary's voice shuts themselves off from the world. Only the battle leader of each sanctuary, the Claw, has the right to approach the voice and ask for guidance. That guidance and spiritual wisdom is then brought back for the benefit of every Codon in the tribe. However, with the rise of the elder dragon Jormag, the great ice ships of the Codon were driven apart. Some fled to the north, others were capsized, torn apart, and destroyed by the dragon's wrath. Some few escaped southward, cut off from their fellows by the destruction and rising tide. The land to the far north cracked and shattered with Jormag's waking, allowing the icy northern ocean to flow through and create new inland seas on which the Codon were cast adrift. Codon exist in a close community on their sanctuaries, acting in concert and living in peace. They have disputes and disagreements, of course, but they consider themselves above most interpersonal conflict. The balance is more important than an individual's needs. Holy Codon's will, as translated by the voice, supersedes any single Codon's wishes. Each sanctuary is led by two important individuals, the voice and the claw. The voice cares for that sanctuary's spirit, giving them guidance, meditating on Codon's will, and sensing the balance of the sanctuary as the world around it. The claw protects and guards the sanctuary, leading the hunters, or when necessary, the warriors. The claw operates as the physical presence and visible leader, but in fact it is a partnered role. The claw guides the people martially, while the voice remains in a place of safety deep inside the sanctuary. Both are needed to rule. Between these two powerful Codon, the sanctuary is run in a very organized and social style. Each member contributes and works to maintain peace, encourage sharing of resources, and provide support for others within the sanctuary. The voice and claw are, essentially, partnered leaders within Codon society. Neither has the right to overturn the other's decisions, and both have clearly delineated spheres of influence. The voice, spiritual; the claw, physical. They are chosen at the same time if possible, and serve for centuries together, leading and guiding their sanctuary and the Codon within. If a claw dies, it is tradition for the voice to retire. So too, if the voice should go mad or pass into Codon's arms, will the claw step away and give another his post. Over the seasons, the Codon spread and multiplied across the land. Their journeys were bounded only by the sea, and everywhere they went, they brought balance to the spirits. They watched, and they learned, and they hunted, and so served the will of Codon. Now all things grow and all things die. Even the glacier is not unchanging. And there came to be a great storm that did not end, though month after month and season after season passed. And the great seers, the voices of the Codon, said it was time to wait and to watch and to learn. With their thick white fur, the Codon would be safe. But waiting was not easy, for there was little to hunt in the storm. and in the great halls the rumbling of bellies echoed like the roaring of bears. And there was a claw without a voice, a hunter among the Codon who refused to stay. He said that fur or no fur, storm or no storm, a hunter must hunt. And he led many others with him into the storm to seek hunting grounds in the lands to the far south, where the snow was light, and they were never seen again. The Codon do not claim any connection or relationship to the Norn race, but some voices choose to interpret early stories of a lost group of Codon as an explanation of the origin of the Norn. If this is true, they argue, then the Norn are failed Codon, who have forgotten their place as judges and protectors of the balance, and that is why their true bear form has been replaced with a fragile, furless state. Because of this pressure from their shaman, a Codon often retreat the Norn as spiritual failures, possibly even a race moving backwards in the cycle of life, towards primitivism and destruction, and that even as the dwarves before them, if this is true, the Norn are a race on the edge of extinction. The Codon venerate Coda, the founder, above all else. They believe that all things are fated to come back again and again, but each time reborn as members of the same race, a sort of spiritual purity maintained throughout reincarnations. Humans come back as humans, Char return as Char, Codon come back as Codon. Only when you are greatly enlightened do you advance and are reincarnated as a member of the next race in the balance. Of course, the Codon believe they are the most spiritually enlightened race in the world, and that, as the top of this reincarnative food chain, is their duty to watch over their world, judge others, and maintain the balance, by force if necessary. They believe that the Codon are the only ones who understand this balance, a word often used when the Codon are justifying their actions, and that it is their holy purpose to maintain it, even if that means fighting or killing. Although a member of an individual race won't summarily be judged according to their race's general activities, the Codon do approach other races with a certain amount of expectant anticipation. They have already begun to judge the people of the southern lands, as they believe that Coda would wish them to do. There's a debate among the Codon shamans, known as voices, as to the fate of the dwarves. Did the dwarves somehow skip ahead and proceed directly to enlightenment, or did they fall out of the bottom and destroy themselves? Either way, they have been removed from the world. Let it be me, mighty Coda, that gives his life for peace. Let it be me that dies for balance. Let it be me that rejoins with nature, knowing that I have fought and sacrificed for that which I believe. For such is the journey of a warrior. Such is the path of the Claw. The Claw is the outward face of leadership among the Codon. Chosen for their charisma, strength at arms, and public leadership potential, it is the Claw's duty to tend to the day-to-day running of the sanctuary, as well as its safety. They move openly through the sanctuary and maintain a small group of guardians whose purpose is to defend the sanctuary and to interfere in rare disputes among the populace. The Claw is essentially the ruler of the sanctuary to those who do not fully understand the Codon culture. However, maintaining the sanctuary's peace is only one of the duties of the Claw. A second is far more important, to serve as the intermediary between Voice and the people of the sanctuary, to help interpret and carry out the will of Coda. The Voice's purpose keeps him sheltered from the outside world, and it is the duty of the Claw to be the link between the Voice and the sanctuary, between the people and the channel to the will of their god. The Codon believe that the fates of the Claw and the Voice are linked, symbolically and mystically entwined with one another and within the sanctuary. Any failure on the part of one taints the other, and must be purified in both. Therefore, a Claw takes his duties seriously, realizing that if he fails, he has not only brought harm to himself or his people, but also to the Voice, and therefore the very spirit and soul of the sanctuary. Let it be me, mighty Coda, that gives his life for knowledge. Let it be me that dies so that truth can survive. Let it be me that rejoins with nature, knowing that I have looked into your eyes and brought back wisdom for my people. For such is the journey of a shaman. Such is the path of the Voice. The Voice is a spiritualist, chosen for their innate deep connection to Coda and their understanding of his will. A combination of high priest and record keeper, the voice maintains a memorized record of all things of great import that have occurred to the Codon of his sanctuary, and passes that history down to a successor when he is near his death. Because the voice is attended by a small staff of shamans, even if he dies prematurely, most of the knowledge will not be lost. However, as the voice rarely leaves his ritual chambers, it is an extremely uncommon occurrence that the voice leaves his post from anything but the passing of his claw, hopefully after several hundred years of service to their people. It is the voice's duty to seek and interpret the will of Codon, and to bring spiritual guidance to the Codon of his sanctuary. In these things, the voice is all-knowing and blessed, possessed of supernatural knowledge, authority, and freedom from any error and sin. They can sanction laws, proclaim judgments on a grand scale, and interpret Codon's will in any situation. Unfortunately, the rituals and path working that a voice must go through in his duties, and the simple fact that their mind is always open to the mists, means that the voice can become unstable. Only through the will of Codon does a voice remain grounded and able to do his duty. It is the claw's logical interpretation of the voice's mysticism that provides structure and law for the sanctuary as a whole. It is rare, but not unheard of, that a voice might be so completely overcome by the visions that they go insane, a sickness known as the Rage of Codon. This is called a time of trial by the Codon, who believe that it means Codon is personally testing their spirituality and the strength of their sanctuary. Usually the voice dies only a few years after a time of trial occurs, as their body shuts down from the strain and the insanity. At that point, the sanctuary is believed to be purified of all sin, judged, and set to order by Codon himself. Ogres are large humanoid individuals. They typically lack hair and are all fairly masculine compared to other races. The main differences between male and female are that males have a spiked spine that protrudes through their skin and have larger horns than females, as well as rougher faces. Females' foreheads' horns are typically only bumps, though some do have larger horns. Ogres as a race are long-lived beings. It is not unheard of for members of the race to be old enough to have witnessed the searing firsthand. They are somehow interlinked with the Jotun. The ogres of the Crystal Desert have a different appearance to their northern counterparts, with more grey skin, larger horns, and a more hunched stature. Ogre society is constructed about their pets. The ogres view their pets as their life partners, and the more impressive a pet is, the more respect its tamer will get from the rest of the tribe. Their approach to taming is typically to dominate the pet, to ensure that it knows who is in charge. Although proper taming can take months or even years, in a pinch, it is possible to simply overpower the beast. Once an animal has been tamed, it is often used in combat or as a beast of burden. Their relationship with nature has been compared to that of the Norn with the spirits of the wild, but a lot less reverent and a lot more work-oriented. The ogres are pragmatic, if nothing else. Despite this, the ogres are deeply affectionate toward their animal companions, and an animal, once tamed, can be sure that it will have its needs met for the rest of its life. Religion. Ogres are not spiritual in any fashion. They have no concept of gods or religious spirits. They do not worship anything or anyone. They do not have religious traditions, superstitions, or any other fantastic explanation about how the world works or how life was created. They simply do not care. Ogres care only for the here and now, the concrete reality of the moment, and have no spiritual belief system to address anything beyond that point. Government. Ogre society is decentralized and tribal. Each village, known as a kraal, is independent from the others. Conflict between multiple kraals is not uncommon. Although ogres tend to be individualistic, they still have leaders who are chosen on a meritocratic basis. The criteria for selection can include smartest, strongest, best beastmaster, or just the best leader. Ogres follow a strict command hierarchy, and the orders of a chieftain are always followed without question, even if that leader is untested or weak. Followed, that is, until the leader is replaced. The Hylek are the frog people of Tyria. Once the name of a specific tribe, it's now common parlance to call all frog people Hylic. Even the frog people themselves have adopted the name Hylic for their race, though they also keep individual tribe names to distinguish themselves from one another. With the warming of the Shiver Peaks, large portions of the southern shore from the boundaries of Kryta to the edge of Ore have become swamps and bayous, prime Hylic territory. The Hylic have expanded into these areas and flourished. As their numbers have grown, they've taken over more land, continuing to spread. The areas the Hylic have chosen to settle are not without their dangers. Krayt, slavers, corsairs, ravenous drakes, and the minions of Zhaitan all routinely threaten Hylic settlements. Despite all of these outside dangers, perhaps the biggest threat to any Hylic tribe is when a rival tribe moves into their territory. Such an incursion often leads to an all-out war until one tribe wipes the other from existence. Even with all of these troubles, the Hylic are expanding during a time in which most races are struggling for survival. For centuries, tales have been told of pillared cities rising above the water far out at sea. Spires reach up from the waves with no land visible on any horizon, and their bases coil down into the ocean depths where no air breather could survive. Lost sailors live there, their ships crushed by storms. Glittering parapets soar, formed from wood, glass, and pirate treasure long thought to be lost at sea. The truth is that such places exist, yet while legends make them sound beautiful and exotic, reality is a far darker tale. These pillared cities are slave pens, built to hold land dwellers alive above the waves until they are required for sacrifice. Those who live upon them are desperate, maddened creatures that gaze down every day into the dark waters and know that their time will come soon. Living on scraps of fish thrown to them by their captors, they eke out a pathetic existence while always watching for a sail on the horizon, praying, begging, and screaming for someone to rescue them before the Krayt return. Krayt society is dark and fanatical. Led by their priesthood, the Eratus, the Krayt follow an ancient doctrine handed down to them by their abyssal prophets and constantly foretell of the prophets' return. The Krayt religion is based on massive obelisks of a unique dark stone that can be found exclusively and rarely on Tyria's ocean floors. The Krayt believe that each of these obelisks was raised upon the site of a Krayt prophet's ascension into a mystic world, a world beyond this one, where these nameless prophets are building an army great enough to eradicate all other species. One day, they will return and drown the surface of Tyria beneath one massive sea. The Krayt sacrifice slaves to show reverence to the prophets and to ensure that the prophets will have servants in their mystical other world. Krayts have never developed a written language. They have excellent memories, and their religious texts are memorized Vedic fashion by the priesthood. These texts are vast in scope and difficult to memorize. Becoming a Krayt Eratus is a lifelong journey and requires tremendous, all-consuming dedication. Furthermore, unknown to the Krayt people, the priests ensure the continuation of their power by subtly changing the words of the massive memorized texts, ensuring that whatever interpretation they require is upheld somewhere in the canon. Land-based historians and scholars theorize that the obelisks on the seafloor are not mystical, but are ancient monuments to religious figures and societal governors of the Krayt. Because the Krayt memorized their lore, some information has been lost over the centuries. The Krayt race has forgotten the obelisk's true purpose and has invented instead a mystical reverence for the monuments and those they represent. Certainly, the obelisks are eerily smooth and have no symbols on them, and thus cannot relate their history firsthand. The Krayt Eratus are the ones who interpret the meaning of these monoliths for their people, and because of the fanaticism of these priests and priestesses, the story of the obelisk's creation and purpose has been twisted to religious use. Like the obelisks, The Krayt are steadfast and immobile in their beliefs. Their legends state that all the races living above water were driven out of the sea by the prophets and forbidden to return. Although these legends seem patently false to other races, the Krayt refuse to listen to any heresies from other races. Destroying them seems a much more effective way to ensure that the Krayt religion is not defamed. The Krayt are aggressive, vicious, and intelligent. They lay eggs and keep hatcheries. Both males and females are given education and battle training, and both genders perform all general societal functions. Krayt are capable of surviving outside the water, but they prefer to build their cities and towns deep beneath the waves. Their cities are often built around one or more of the great obelisks, and usually contain underwater hatcheries, arenas for gladiatorial combat, and long lines of glowing road markers. These incandescent paths are visible even to those swimming some distance above. The Krayt are ardent mathematicians, constantly using maths and numerology, as well as magic, in a constant attempt to determine the date of the prophet's return. Krayt are very flexible and are excellent swimmers. They have 3 stages of existence: larval, adolescent, and mature. Larval Krayt are weak and fragile. They're kept in guarded hatcheries until they master swimming and basic life skills. Adolescents serve as scouts. Mature Krayt exhibit the strength and dedication for which their race is famous. All Krayt are willing to die if necessary, so that the Krayt beliefs and race can survive. Of all the races of Tyria, the ape-like Grawl are the most underappreciated and underestimated. A race of furry, simian bipeds, the Grawl can speak and use tools and weapons. They even have a fair approximation of clothing, but they lack most of the trappings of advanced society. They make their homes in caves on the edge of civilization, and are considered a lesser race of raiders and bandits by the more developed cultures around them. While many Grawl do resort to banditry, just as many seek nothing more than to be left alone. We are the meek, we are the humble, we watch and we wait for others to stumble. Grawl are humanoid, ape-like creatures, slightly larger than the typical human, and are covered with long fur of various shades of grey. Because of their faces and postures are definitely simian, Char scholars have theorised that the Grawl are a debased form of human, or that the humans are a type of Grawl uplifted by their gods. Human researchers, on the other hand, point out the heavy haunched shoulders of the Grawl and the fact that they walk on their toes, both features of the Char, and posit a close kinship between the Char and the primitive Grawl. Unlike the Char, however, the Grawl run with a bounding, skipping gait that gives them a sufficient altitude to see their targets at a distance, and they move with a sure-footed grace that gives them an advantage in their rocky territory. Grawl live in small tribes consisting of several families, usually under the command of one or more shamans. These shamans are responsible for both the spiritual and daily life of their family unit. They wield magical powers to help protect their flock and enforce the will of their gods. Grawl tend to subsist as hunter-gatherers, though they often rely on scavenging. They do not plant fields, and although they herd animals, they do not otherwise domesticate them. They have no architecture, using only natural caverns as their homes. These subterranean dwellings are decorated with cave paintings, netted frames of wood, and strings of stolen glass balls and other scavenged baubles. Fire warms, but fire also burns. The gods keep us safe, but sometimes they destroy. We kill, or we are killed. This ends the lesson. It's from Crippus, Grawl Raider. The Grawl are native to Tyria, and Ascalon in particular. The earliest mention of them is found in early Char military tributes that predate the arrival of humans in the area. In these annals, the Char are always portrayed as victors, with the defeated Grawl pulling the Char commanders in great chariots. The Char dominated the Grawl, forcing them into the Shiver Peak and Blaze Ridge mountains and beyond, where they lived at a subsistence level. Dispersed and powerless, the Grawl survived as raiders in the human kingdom of Ascalon and elsewhere. When the Char returned under the Flame Legion, they successfully enlisted, and in many cases enslaved, many of the local Grawl as militia. The Grawl proved to be unmanageable beyond a squad level, however, and were used primarily as scouts. Since the conquest of Ascalon, The Grawl have returned to their meagre existence at the edges of civilization. Few races have the need or interest to interact with the Grawl, whose lack of respect for personal property and untrustworthy behaviour makes any dealings difficult. A number of individuals of many races have looked upon the Grawl as potential allies, cheap labour, or easy marks. All have been disappointed in the results. The Grawl today exist much as they did hundreds of years ago. Superstitious cave dwellers, whose only interest in the outside world consists of slaying those who wander into their territories or pose an affront to their gods. I am one of the faithful. You are mistaken in your beliefs. They are all godless heretics. Grawl are bound together by faith, but separated by it as well. They are a deeply religious, shamanistic people, but their particular brand of animism creates numerous localized factions that are mutually intolerant of each other. In a nutshell, the Grawl believe that particularly important places, individuals, and items are imbued with great spiritual force. This differs from the animist beliefs of the Norn, who hold that the spirits of the wild are imbued in all of its children, i.e. bear is present in all bears. The Grawl version of animism professes that all physical things contain spirits, and that particularly powerful or unusual beings and items hold spirits capable of granting miracles, and are therefore worthy of veneration. For example, that particular bear is powerful, we should worship it. By enhancing the power of a given item, location, or being, Grawl hope to curry its favour and protection. As a result, Grawl tend to worship a wide variety of items, ranging from natural features to unusual phenomena to powerful creatures. One tribe of Grawl may bring offerings to a rock feature that looks like a Grawl's face, while another may revere a great swamp beast and sacrifice travelers to it in order to save themselves. The depth and sincerity of their worship tends to pit rival Grawl tribes against each other, as each believes they have the true religion, and all others are led by false gods. On occasion, great religious movements form among the Grawl, encompassing multiple tribes throughout an entire region. During these transient periods of religious fervour, Grawl will abandon their traditional beliefs for the trending new faith. At times like this, the Grawl are at their most dangerous, for the religious friction between the new faith and the old can erupt into a bloody, holy war, one in which all non-Grawl are potential converts, hostages, or enemies. The superstitious Grawl are belittled by other more advanced races for their xenophobia and the seemingly ridiculous nature of the things they worship. Humans and Asura tend to be the most dismissive of Grawl beliefs, while the Norn are more sympathetic, feeling the Grawl have simply missed the large point of the spirits of the wild. The Char, who historically have oppressed the Grawl, are the most emphatic in trying to cure them of their belief system, as their superstitions make the Grawl easy prey for manipulative agencies such as the Flame Legion. However, many Char draw a parallel between Grawl animism and human religion, to the irritation to both Grawl and humans.